All right, thank you. This is Scott Rogers. I call to order the Appropriations Committee meeting for Thursday, April 3rd. This open meeting of the Northborough Appropriations Committee is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the committee are allowed to participate either in person or remotely. The Act allows the committee to meet in person and remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob D'Amico.
Aye.
Jeff Knight.
Aye.
Terry Halloran.
Aye.
Tim Kalin.
Aye.
And we'll see if George is running late or may join us in a little bit. And then staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jason Little.
Present.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody. That, welcome. We'll start things off with public comment. If there's any folks to make a comment, come forward here in the room or raise your hand in the meeting. And Fran, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Fran Backstrand, 76 Cedar Hill Road. First, I just want to say thank you to all of you for your willingness to be volunteers on this committee. You have a lot of responsibility in reviewing and assessing the proposed budget for next year, trying to balance, the use and needs of the administration and the town with the ability of those of us who have to pay the bills. I do want to say that I understand it's advisory and that the policies and goals are set by the town administrator through the direction of the select board. So I'm not expecting you to change their policies and goals, but I'm hoping that you can give them clear guidance and understanding that there has to be a balance between those goals and objectives. We can't tax to the max the residents who have to pay for those goals, and I think that as elected officials, they certainly can appreciate that. I do want to say that I understand that the new position for the Council on Aging was removed, as was the dispatcher and the IT position, and while it's unfortunate, I appreciate it. It is not something that we can do in the same time that we're dealing with the healthcare costs that are relatively out of our control. I thought by removing these positions when the healthcare insurance premiums was addressed was an indication that we were serious about the need to prevent an operational override for next year. At the summit last year, while everything was very different, the proposed increase was about 4.5%. I believe right now we're looking at closer to 8.3% increase on the draft budget that you'll review tonight. So it's really the taxpayers that are going to have to adjust our household budgets to accommodate this increase. I think there was a gentleman, I think it was George at the public hearing that said, I'm going to have to figure out where the money's going to come from. I really want to impress upon you to advise and counsel the people who make the policies and decisions that they need to do the same in the budget for the town. I don't believe that we can propose a budget for this year without truly understanding the impact for next year, which is something that your member Terry Halloran has been speaking to at each of the meetings. And there is so much uncertainty at a state and federal level right now. I really think we need to position ourselves for the best position possible because there's a lot of unknowns for coming in the next year. I'm hopeful that your recommendations to the town administrator and the select board will be that they need to look to possibly further cut the operating budget to help stave off the need for Proposition override next year. I've heard some people say that Proposition 2.5 override is inevitable, but it's not. We can make difficult decisions today, or we can make really difficult decisions next year, because there's no guarantee if we come up to that Prop 2.5 override need that the voters are going to say yes. And then it's not just level funded, level service. It is draconian cuts back to I don't know, 2019 to pre-COVID, I don't know. But I just want you to be really conscious of that when you make your recommendations to the policy-making boards and the town administrator. And be mindful, again, this was something that was brought up at your meeting. There are over 3,330 residents over the age of 65. While not all of them are on fixed incomes, the majority of them are at least on their way to a fixed income lifestyle. That represents 30% of our elected population, registered voters. And so I'd really appreciate it if you would think about them. I don't want to say it just because I'm an older person myself now, because I do really think that this is a way that you have to learn how to live within your means, and sometimes that means saying no. My kids did not get new cars. They didn't have nicer cars than the teachers did at the school. They actually weren't even allowed to drive until they were senior. When we bought our house in 1987, you can tell how long it's been, we were approved for a mortgage at $185,000. So the realtor said, let's look at $200,000 homes. And we said, no, actually, let's look at $150,000 homes, because we might want that extra levy limit for other things. And that's how I approached my finances for the 40 years, which is probably why we will be married 40 years in May. And that I would hope that you would guide the policy board and the town administrator to do the same for the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. I don't see any other comments, so we'll move over to approval of meeting minutes. We've got a set of minutes from March 13th. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes from March 13th as distributed.
And second? Is there a second? Anyone? Second. Thanks, Jeff. Any discussion on that? All right, it'll be a roll call vote to approve. Bob?
Abstain.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And I am an aye. That's 4-0, one abstention. And then we have a set of minutes from March 18th.
Move to approve the minutes for March 18th.
Thanks, Bob. Is there a
Second.
Any discussion on that? We'll do the roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Scott is also an aye. That's 5-0. Thank you very much. In our packet is a memo from Jason that provides an update on the budget status. There was continued changes since we last met and had the joint public hearing. Jason, you want to walk us through the highlights of that?
Yeah, sure. It's a fairly lengthy memo, but it's intended to lay out the things that had changed. Typically, I think throughout this process, we don't generally continue changing the budget. There's a period of time where we have to be done with it and have to live with what's in it and go to press with what's going to be in the budget. As a result of the hearing and some late-breaking information that came, we kind of knew that the timing of the fire station project and the bids it was going to be a tight timeline to finalize the debt service budget. That was one thing that changed. So in appreciation of the comments that were made at the hearing and, trying to implement those, there's not that many levers that can be pulled without making a policy decision of cutting departments and moving back, retrenching from a level service budget. So this is the outcome of the levers that we had left to pull, so to speak, for what could be changed without affecting departmental budgets. So the net effect of this was we presented a budget that was reflecting somewhere around an 11.5% increase to the average single-family home. In part, the largest component and largest increase within that alone, the largest sole increase was the fire station debt project, which is included in the tax bill. We're going out to bond currently now. We're working on finalizing the structure of that bond, and we're getting rating calls from the credit rating agency next week. So we're moving forward with the borrowing. The project is moving forward. The bids fit within the budget. They came in approximately, the general contractor bids came in approximately $6.5 million less than what was originally budgeted. So we had already in the budget tried to minimize the first round of borrowing to tie out to what the cash flow was. We got an updated cash flow analysis from our owner's project manager, and we integrated that into the bond issue. So we reduced the bond issue by $3.5 million, and that's reflected in the budget. We were just notified of some settlements that followed. The assessor is working out settlements for some cases that were at the appellate tax board. It affects what we raise for what's called overlay. That's similar, for people watching at home, overlay is similar to the concept of reserve for bad debt for a business. Every year within taxes, we raise a certain amount to cover potential errors that the assessors have made or abatement applications that people have put in that are granted through the ATB process. Just so people know, I'm being a little bit long-winded about this, but the process with an overlay, you get your actual tax bill in the winter. There's a period of time you have 30 days generally from when that's due to apply for an abatement if you feel like your valuation's incorrect. The assessors will weigh the merits of your application. It's possible that they've misvalued your property. We value properties based on full fair cash value, based on market effects and market values. It's possible they manage millions of points of data in their database. If they got something wrong or something was not updated, you can apply for an abatement, and they'll look at your individual property versus your property record card, which is online. And if they deny your abatement, you have the ability to appeal that to the state's appellate tax board, and there's a process for that. So generally, it's not homeowners that are applying to the appellate tax board. It's generally corporations for commercial property, and each one of those applications tends to have a much higher liability for the town. For instance, we had a balance in our overlay account that led to us declaring surplus last year. That was the result of building up the balance because the largest taxpayer in town had filed a case and was with the appellate tax board. Internally, we felt like our data was strong. We had an appraisal done of the the property, and we felt we would have prevailed had that gone through the process. However, there was a settlement that was negotiated, and overnight, the balance that we had, there was a bit of surplus there. Last year, $600,000 was declared surplus. That got used within the capital plan as a source. Going through this year, it was much smaller numbers, but similar functions happened where it wasn't the largest taxpayer in town, but there were some cases that were settled, and we had less of a liability there than we had projected. So these numbers were developing real time. So the way overlay gets managed, the balance is sufficient now, so we could potentially raise zero next year within the tax rate. Typically, we, want 0.5% of the tax levies, $375,000. So that's typically, we've been running the overlay on a very lean basis, but we did have potential surplus, so we reduced the budget. That's one of the few levers we have to pull. So that doesn't affect any departments, but it just lowers the balance that we'll have in overlay. Sorry for that long-winded explanation. I hope everybody understood
Let me
that.
have you pause just there for a moment, just to recognize George joined us at 7:15, or 6:17, trying to say that. George, if you can just indicate that you're here for the purposes of the recording.
I am here.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Jason.
Thanks. So the next change was the debt service. That the effect of that was reducing the debt service budget by $269,000. That has an effect of reducing that impact that was projected by about $32, or 0.3% of the 11.5. The next thing we looked at was within local receipts. Local receipts is our third largest revenue component in the general fund budget. Local receipts, we have to make a forecast for the next year, and we have to prove to the state and provide evidence we're going to meet our local receipts budget. We had This typically is a source where we generate free cash annually that we use to, generally, we use very conservative numbers in the local receipts budget. We generate more than that. There's certain one-time revenues that sometimes drop in as local receipts, but sometimes our motor vehicle excise, which is the largest component within local receipts, comes in better than what we've projected, and that's kind of by design, because we need to, in order to set the tax rate in the fall, have a conservative budget that we prove that we can attain, so that when taxes are calculated, the other receipts that are underwriting those taxes and lowering those taxes are definitely going to be attained, and we're not going to face a deficit in the future. So looking at the way motor vehicle excise works within local receipts, and motor vehicle excise is the largest component of local receipts, they're billed on a calendar year basis, so we typically don't know what the commitment is. When I say commitment, it's the amount that comes, the state notifies us what taxable value is there for motor vehicle from the Department of Motor Vehicles. They tell us what's there for value. We then send out a bill, and that's the commitment process when I say commitment. But we get that in generally the big commitment for motor vehicles in February. We looked at that versus the commitment from last year, and again, these aren't revenues we've collected yet, but they're revenues, they're bills that have been billed. So that commitment was approximately $250,000 more than the prior year. So we felt comfortable raising that another $150,000 and thus lowering taxes within local receipts. And finally, transfers from other funds. These are amounts that we transfer out of revolving funds. For example, there's I think the largest single transfer is from the fire revolving fund, which is funded by ambulance receipts for the most part, and that underwrites the fire department within the general fund budget. So we increased a few of those, some of those transfers within the budget, and I think those totaled $43,000. So in total, through these few actions, we reduced the budget by the tax levy by $838,000, and that's the purpose of this memo, and that's where we stopped with the budget. And I don't know if I highlighted what was presented as a $1,090 increase was cut back to $966 or 10.2%. And that the 10.2% is a larger than usual increase. I think through multiple projections from prior years using slightly different assumptions every step of the way, we had known that when you drop in a big project like the debt service for the fire station project, which is a very large project, we knew we were going to face a 10% increase in the year that the debt service came online for that project. And that concludes my discussion around this memo, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions around it.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions to Jason on that budget update? And Tim, periodically, I'll try to look at the screen, make sure you're not raising a hand, but if I misrecognizing you, just shout out.
Thank you.
All right, so that gives us our final look going into town meeting on budget. Jason, there aren't any other changes that we anticipate, right? In terms of any other further final negotiations and all that is going to happen afterwards.
Yeah, so again, within the budget, there's 5 union contracts that are open. Within the town's budget, we've came up with an estimate for the overall pot that's going to be available to redistribute among the departments once contracts are settled, provided they are settled. But we did make a provision in there so that's typically what's behind the larger than usual increase that's in the town departmental increases.
Excellent.
But none of the contracts have been settled yet.
Okay.
So that process is still ongoing.
So as we get into our report and stuff, I know we'll be referring back to the budget on some items, so I'm going to keep mine open to that summary page. Next then would be a discussion. Stephanie came to us and asked about a letter of support for Project Evolve. That was came before us and prior. We made an update to that since the original bit, so that update is in our packet. This is an opportunity for us to weigh in and support that discussion about offering a tax incentive to substantial expansion effort of one of the businesses here in town. Before we talk too much in terms of if there is any discussion, there's 2 typos, Jason.
Okay.
That just look, I'll hand this to you afterwards. In the second line, there's an S missing from matters, and on about the 4th line, there's an E missing from evolve. There's just minor typos there.
Gotcha, I see that one.
Any discussion from the committee on further changes to this letter? Or our support of the project? Go ahead, Terry.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very supportive of what the concept is of what they're doing. What this letter basically does is say that as a committee, we're saying that we are happy to help enter into good faith negotiations regarding certain incentives. We don't know enough about the whole project as a whole, timing of it, what they're looking for in terms of an actual incentive plan. But as a philosophical matter, yes, we're okay entering into good faith negotiations, and that's all this letter basically says. And I don't think as a board that is there to make recommendations to town meeting, that there's much more that we can say than that. And I think the edits that we've made to the original draft of the letter reflect that, and I think that's an appropriate thing for the committee to sign off on.
Excellent. One question then, and if it doesn't come up here, it's kind of in general talking about some of the later articles that are on the warrant. Is there a part for the Appropriations Committee to play in the furthering of these projects? And that's a question I don't know, and I don't know if it's something to discuss, but that, I think it would be worthwhile that as those plans are developed, there's an opportunity for us to review and offer, further support and whatnot. So I think that's what I'll look to get back to the select board and the town administrator, is our involvement to the extent that it can be done in looking at those deals and helping where we can and advising.
Well, I guess we're going to be asked to opine upon those articles later in the meeting.
And we've got.
I think we can defer our comments till we get to that piece of it.
Yeah.
I certainly have a strong opinion as to those warrant articles, and we can discuss that when we get to that vote.
Sounds good. Okay. So before us would be a motion to approve this letter to be sent to the appropriate staff and boards, indicating our support.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the letter as drafted in our packet and forward that to the appropriate commercial partner as well as the select board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. This will be a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is also an aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you for that. Okay, next order of business. I'm going to save this one for Jason. That's the typos. So also in our packet was taking the structure of the report that we had last year, updating the appropriate sections, and putting in the placeholders for voting our recommendations. You'll see towards the end, we didn't complete all the replacements to get the warrant article language into all those tables that we'd see at the end. So we've got some, we had some follow-up of that language that we don't see in the printout that was in the package, and we can talk through those. Since this draft do have some just adjustments in terms of some tense and perspective and wording, doesn't materially change the paragraphs, but got some updates from Terry and myself on that I'll give to Jason. You'll see that in the next draft that's submitted. A little bit of just adjusting the wording on these. You'll see that we have a section to place any rationale that we want to develop in terms of our discussion of the individual articles. We've got a placeholder to put that narrative in, as well as then the sections for tallying up the votes and recording some additional commentary on the articles. Before I go any further then, did anybody see any further adjustments to the standard sections that they wanted to include?
Through the chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
do you have more material edits that you'd like to make beyond just like the grammatical or wording of some of the things, and maybe you want to discuss what would change?
Yeah, okay, so then, as we look at the printed draft that we have here.
I'm sorry, I want to finish the second part of
Oh,
it.
sorry,
What I
sorry, go
meant to say, and I didn't say it quick enough. But, yeah, this draft that you're looking at tonight was included in the packet publicly. So just, navigating between what might be the finished product and the version that was in the packet, I think might be helpful.
Yeah, so there'll be this kind of tabular structure that's kind of complex, simplifying that. So you'll see those changes. So then, like I said, as we get into the end where we were just kind of had placeholders for those tables, that will be filled in that way. So that structure will be simplified as we go forward. Was there an other element, Jason?
No, I meant more of the commentary at the beginning, before we get into the tables with the individual articles and opinions and so forth.
Yeah, so as we update this draft, that might be tomorrow or first thing Monday, I'll get it out to the committee again. If there are further changes, then we'll go through that process of getting any changes back into Jason. It is my intent that as we get to the end of the bit here, the approval to, work with Jason and do the final language, but I do want to publish another draft for you all, so that if there are any additional adjustments, that you catch something that we miss, you've got an opportunity to say that. But keep going, but
Oh, I was just going to say the same thing, is typically at the end of the meeting, where recommendations are sought or voted, if at the end, typically there's a provision to approve the report as to be finalized between the chair and myself and administration to finish the report and correct any typos and things like that. But anything of substance materially should go through the committee, and I don't want to take anybody's voice away that's on the committee.
Okay, so we'll see as we get into some of the discussion on the individual items. Well, let's talk a little bit now. So we'll probably find some simple statements that are easy to record tonight. Make sure that gets incorporated. Some might involve some sentences that we need to construct over clearer heads, and those will come in later, but we'll have a way to incorporate those. Okay. Any questions on kind of the narrative content and the structure of the report? Because what comes next is going through, each of the articles and recording our recommendations of that. So what I'll ask is hold me back if I'm trying to go too fast, but I am going to try to go through in a structured way where it's a call to a motion on whether we recommend that the article be approved at town meeting. We'll take the motion, we'll take the second, and then we'll open it for discussion, right? Then we'll have the discussion, take our vote, talk about what we might need to annotate for that item on the report and go on to the next one. So there's an opportunity that on some of these, we'll be sliding through them pretty quickly, and then other ones we'll probably have more discussion. But I want to recognize that sometimes I get into a role, and if I take the pace too fast, let me know, and then if I take the pace too slow, let me know, so that we get through this work tonight.
We'll have George smack you.
George, just reach over and go from that. So what I'll do in the method of identifying is I'll use the article number and the project or description. I'm going to go from the list we see here on page 58 of the printout. And get a drink of water.
And if anybody's wondering where the page numbers came from, they were just pre-numbered from the warrant book last year, so anybody watching at home, your report is not 58 pages long or longer than that. It's just much shorter than that, but that's where the page numbers are kind of at random. The page numbers will definitely change.
It's set up for inclusion in the booklet.
Can I ask a question first? And I may be just trying to figure this wrong, but you mentioned, you said we were marching toward a 10% increase in the tax levy because of the fire station. What would be the percent increase in our tax levy this year if not counting the fire station?
Let's see. It still would have been in the 5 to 6%.
Okay, I was calculating 8%, but I may be doing it wrong.
Well, overall, it's going up 8.87%
All right,
in the general fund.
all right. So I was
And-
figuring
and-
2% would,
Yeah, so there's a couple of different percentages that we're calculating. We're calculating the impact on the single-family tax, and we've built in a conservative assumption in terms of the value of the single-family home, the value of that going up 5% relative to everything else, where everything else doesn't necessarily increase the same rate. So that was the 10.2%. The overall budget's going up 8.87% with the fire station. The debt excluded debt is, if we reduce that, it somewhere would be 5.6.
okay.
Based upon the version that we saw at the public hearing, the tax levy total increase would be, excluding the fire station debt, based upon what those numbers were on March 24th.
Right.
Would have been about 6.6%.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, and-
it's in the neighborhood of what Jason was saying.
And
I have
that goes
just about-
down because of some of these other factors of us pushing
Right.
things down,
So-
but.
So about 6% is probably the right ballpark for
Okay.
just educational purposes.
Yeah,
Grenade distance, as they say.
okay.
That help, George? Yeah.
Well, before we start on this, one more question is, what does our vote mean, kind of thing? If, again, we vote as a board, kind of thing, what does it really mean, kind of thing? Is it just, we're saying our recommendation, or we are comfortable with this, or?
So the shortest way to say it is we are voting whether we recommend the body at town meeting to approve that article.
Okay,
So to oversimplify, right, it's that yes, no.
okay,
In our discussion and any narrative we want to put in the report is an opportunity to, give some color, commentary to those votes. And so so it's an opportunity for us to provide some greater level of detail on, our discussions around that particular item.
Okay. I'm just looking at what's happened over the last 2 years, and we're over 6% last year. We're over 6% excluding the fire station. We're over 6% this year. And I'm just concerned about that process and the continuation of that. And I don't know how to register that publicly, that we can't keep this up.
Right, but at the end of the day, I recall last year when we voted no, town meeting still voted yes. And I recall one member of the body standing at the microphone and asking why we recommended no for one of the articles, and Scott had to address that. So, well, at least one person asked why, but town meeting approved it anyway. So at the end of the day, I guess we do our best job to give advice to, but I don't know, I like to view it also though, is that we're still also informing the town administration, we're informing the select board what we think. And hopefully that carries through into the following year, and hopefully it does some good. I mean, because that's all we can do is give advice.
Yeah, okay. It's just, again, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with this
Yeah.
budget. I was a little uncomfortable last year. I'm doubly uncomfortable this year.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know what to do about it. I mean, it seems like our process is, well, this is what we need, and at the end of it, it's the homeowner that is going to have to, because, again, we've talked about this, our budget's going up this much. It's not like everyone in town's income went up that much. And so what we're doing when we recommend this is we're telling taxpayers, you've got to figure out what you're going to cut out of your budget to make this work for us. And I'm just wondering how to get more care about what we're doing in that realm across. And we went through the budget process this year, and it tends to be, okay, here we've done the best we could. We use this word level services. We've said level services for every year I've been on this committee, but it seems like it keeps going up. And, we have more people, we have, more things, and I'm just wondering how the budget's not level. Even if this, so I'm just wondering, how can we raise that concern and think about what we need to look at going forward, because we can't keep doing this. And, I've looked at, we've all seen the kind of graphs that said, here's the CPI, here's how inflation's gone up. And there's certain industries, you look at higher education and it's going up like this, and you look at healthcare and it's going up like this. And all of those, it's all like, we know we can't continue it forever, but where do we start to at least raise the alarm that maybe we've got to think about, what's happening? And this is nothing about, I know the immense amount of work that went into building this budget and the pressures you guys are under to try and, maintain them. So this is not a reflection on anything. It's just a question that at the end of the line are people who have no choice to a certain extent of, it's like they've got to eat it somehow. And so there's, we all have our budgets at home. And, we look at it and say, okay, well, if this went up, I've got to find something to balance that. And I'm concerned that, again, if we keep, it seems like it's accelerated over the last couple of years. And if we keep this up, we're going to be
Well, to that point, I mean, we've typically talked about annually budgets that have been level services, but level services when there's been enhancements annually. Last year, there was an addition of somewhere between 4.5 FTEs in the general government budget, which is the first additions that have been made.
Right.
In a while to that quantity. I mean, that,
Right.
you know,
And
in
we've
terms
got
of the municipal budget,
firefighter,
that's.
EMTs hitting the budget now over the next 3, we got a grant to get it started, but
Right.
there, so there's increases are in there, and maybe it's semi-level, but, I mean, I think a little bit, I don't know if we could kind of enter into the budget process saying, we want to do the best we can within a cap. And, the cap can't be 6% or 8%, the cap's got to be something that's reasonable considering the fact that ultimately the taxpayers are going to fund the increase no matter what it is. So I'm just concerned about the approach and concerned it's not sustainable. So, I mean, we can get by this year. I'm not saying that it won't, but I just don't think the approach is sustainable if we don't start to figure out how to, and I realize what I'm asking is tough because it is making some very hard decisions about where to spend money and where not to spend it, but I just think we need to start to think about it because the budget is growing. If you look at it, it's going like this. It's increasing steeper every year. So I'm just I'm concerned about that.
Yeah. What I'd like to try then is in the
Mr.
section
Chairman,
of our-
Tim's hand is up.
Oh, yeah, let me get to Tim first then. Go ahead,
All
Tim.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I've been thinking about the increases in budget, two things come to mind. The first is that the state of Massachusetts is one of the safest, most stable states in the country. And Northborough was ranked as the safest town in the safest state. And in addition to that, our education, specifically the high school, is in the top 20 high schools in the state. And again, the state of Massachusetts is in the top 3 states in the country as far as education goes. So when you think about the budget, safety and education are 2 of the biggest budgetary items that we have. And the performance and the use of that money is reflected in the safety of our community and the ranking of our school system. Now, to do those things cost money. You can't do those for nothing. Look at our police department, they always have the equipment they need, they're always properly staffed. The fire department, they're getting a new fire station, but over the years, they've been, for the most part, staffed adequately and have had the equipment that they've needed. I think now as a community, what we're faced with is an asset and infrastructure issue. The fire station's old. Some of the schools are old. Town hall is old. 4 West Main is old. On top of that, we've got White Cliffs. And on top of that, the town just bought, I forget what it was, 22 acres off of Whitney Street. And that's 22 acres of land that industry was interested in, that is now not only, it's taken off the tax rolls, and it's going to cost the town money to maintain those 22 acres. So these are decisions that have been made that lead to these increases in taxes. And I think if people want to continue down that path, you're gonna, it just costs money to do those things. That's all.
Thanks, Tim. What I'd like to try to do to incorporate that, because prior meetings, we've talked about the consumption of levy capacity over the last couple of years. George, you missed some great comments by Fran at the beginning that that we'll catch up on during public comment, which reflected the points you were making as well. I'm going to need some help, but I want to try to wrap those ideas into our report.
And, Mr. Chairman, some of those ideas are incorporated in the narrative, but it's only,
It's just those few sentences.
it's only a few sentences, and as I reviewed it, one of the things was like, well, how do you make it a little bit more apparent and stuff
Yeah,
like
so I
that?
want to try to craft
Okay.
something for that. So let me take that. And then what I want to do is then bring that into then, okay, so here's our recommendation for fiscal '27. And
For
then looking
26.
ahead of setting, rather than level services, we look at what a department would be if it's level funded.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So then
Right.
that can be some of the budgetary directions that go out in the next budget cycle. So I want to try to incorporate those thoughts and then make it in more of then a further recommendations to staff and budgetary authorities about, preparation for next cycle.
Yeah.
I'll try to do that. So that's,
And again, my things, and, I agree with everything Tim said, and that's true. And this is really a thing of balancing what we need and what we want with what we can afford, and keeping all those things in balance. So, that's kind of part of the problem. And I'm not suggesting that the budget for next year should be set level with the budget this year. It's going to increase, but we need a cap on the increase and say we've got to figure out how to live within that cap.
That's called Prop 2.5.
Well, we're running out of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
okay. That's great. That's the sort of discussion, I think, comments before and our own deliberation at earlier meetings have brought out, so that's great. We do our best to reflect that in the update to the report. Awesome. Okay. Let's try one. First one's easy, right? For Article 4, prior year's bills, there won't be any. So this will be something passed out for a town meeting, so not something that we need to take a recommendation on. See how easy that one was?
It's all downhill from here.
Article 5, town budget. I'd like to call for a motion to recommend approval for Article 5 at town meeting. Probably should have someone move.
I don't think anyone's too enthralled with it.
I think that's an indication of some of the feelings.
Well, we need to move it to discuss it, right?
And I'll second.
So I'll move to,
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Terry. All right, let's discuss. Go ahead, Terry.
Frankly, I don't know what to do with it. At town meeting floor last year, when I was not on the committee, I voted no against the town budget. And I noted that we were going to have a Prop 2.5 problem, if not FY '26, FY '27. And we do. And I think having a Prop 2.5 override next year is a bad, bad thing for this town. It's not good. And we should be doing everything we can to minimize the amount of such a Prop 2.5 override in FY '27. The dilemma comes is that we get a snapshot of a few departments' budgets, and it's not possible for us in this capacity to do a line item veto to suggest what to change. That all becomes a policy issue from the select board and the town administrator, who frankly should be here tonight, since it's that person's budget.
Terry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't want to be insensitive, but the town administrator had a death in her family and had to
Then
attend
you
the
should have
wake.
told us that
so-
ahead of time.
So
before I put
I'm
my-
sorry, I
before
don't mean
put
to be.
my foot in the mouth, but.
Sorry, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad.
But and our condolences to her. And then maybe we should, have another meeting before town meeting with her present to make sure that this feedback gets to her. I don't know what to do with it, because we're going to have a 2.5 override, and it's a bad thing, but I can't go and say, because of we don't have enough knowledge to to tell exactly what to cut. That comes from a policy decision. I will
Great.
probably end up recommending the town meeting approve this. It's with a great deal of regret I'm saying that. I don't think that the select board nor the town administrator has really listened to our concerns over the last 6 months about a Prop 2.5 override. I think we've gotten some lip service. I think the numbers that we have and the budget that we have and the knowledge that Jason has provided to us as a group has been absolutely outstanding. Municipal finance and government accounting is a very complicated, intertwined mess. And Jason, you've done a tremendous job of educating us all on it, and for that, I thank you. But our clear direction to town meeting needs to be, you don't really have a choice, you're going to have to approve this, but we're going to, as an advisory group, do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And if the select board and the town administrator doesn't want to listen to it, then it's going to go to a 2.5 override, and that's going to be a problem. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I've probably said too much, so.
Oh, thanks, Terry. Last year, we had several articles that we didn't have enough information in order to take a vote. So there is the opportunity to have additional meetings before town meeting, receive additional information. One thing we could do would be to either retract or amend this motion and look to get further information, have further discussions, and not vote on our recommendation of this tonight.
I'm not sure additional information is going to help.
Okay.
Again, it's almost too late to kind of come in now. I mean, one of the things I thought is we go back and said, look, knock 1%, 2% off these budgets, and go back to the departments and saying, you've got 1 or 2% less, figure out how to make it work, kind of thing. But it's kind of hard to just throw that out there at the 11th hour type thing. But the problem is that you could get more information, and it's not going to really help us do anything concrete about this anyway. So we're down to that dilemma of, I mean, part of me is like, I was thinking I could come in here and just vote no on all of it, and it doesn't matter. First, I'm just one vote of the 5, but even if this entire board said, we don't approve of this at all, we cannot recommend this, it doesn't matter. It's going to be decided at town meeting kind of thing. So it's a little late, and the problem is the people at town meeting are probably they're going to see these numbers for the first time at town meeting. And so I don't quite know. I think maybe the best thing is to do is say, okay, we'll go forward with this like we have done in the past, and but make sure it's noted that the level of discomfort with how fast this is growing, and the idea that we need to be a little bit more, not careful is not the right word, but we need to rebalance ourselves going forward. Because I think one way or the other, we're probably going to be looking at an override next year no matter what.
And it's important that, our colleagues in the school committee and the regional school committee, I mean, they're going to have union contracts coming up. They need to be very clear as to where we are from an override perspective. I know when we had the school committee in, the superintendent said he's aware of it, and he and the town administrator were in communication with that, and we had asked, could you give us some strategies about what you're thinking about? And, I know everybody's busy, but we didn't get any of that. So we're kind of left hanging to say, what's next year really going to look like? And that's a difficult spot to be in. So,
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I don't disagree with what's being said here, but I don't see the harm in what Scott's suggesting, that we can do maybe a quick look, maybe something low-hanging fruit that maybe be able to cut out of the budget or something. I don't see why we couldn't do that.
So, well, yeah, I don't know about that, but I know that we went to the financial summit, we both walked out of the room and said, wow, this sounded crazy.
Yeah.
This is like next level crazy what we're hearing out of these people.
Right.
I heard Jason tonight say they pulled all the levers they could pull without going to the departments, without impacting the departments. And the problem is, we should have been doing that to the departments 6 months ago, 9 months ago. The one thing I'll acknowledge is that we've now had 2 budget cycles in a row where we didn't have a town administrator for a good chunk of it.
Correct.
So, I think that, when I vote to recommend approving this budget at town meeting, which I think I'll be stuck doing also, it's because I want to give Stephanie, I want to give her a chance to heed the advice, because we said last year, let's not ever do this again. We
Right.
said this last year.
And then we
And now
did.
we're sitting here tonight saying it again. Oh, this is horrible. This is a poison pill. Let's never do it again. And a year later, we're doing it again. This is unacceptable, and we're doing it again. The departments really didn't take a hit. They're still wanting all the same things that they always want. It's not really sinking in. And like Terry's saying, it'll sink in when the town votes no on an override. That's when it'll sink in. Because they'll be in a world of hurt really quick. Because, we get 1% of our residents show up to town meeting. Wait till you see what happens when there's an override on the table, right? When there's an election, when there's an override on the table, you wait to see what happens then. You'll get more than 1%. I think this is abysmal. I think we're in a terrible place. But the only mitigating factor is that we've not had a consistent town administrator. And so I'm willing to roll the dice with her, because we've had some conversations. I do have some faith that we're on the same page, that she's hearing us.
Okay.
And to go into the next budget cycle, see what happens. But yeah, I feel like this is deja vu, George. Like, we're here again?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I make just a couple comments to put some of this stuff? I'm not disagreeing with, like, the discomfort with the amount or the lack of levy capacity, but some of the context here was this calamity with health insurance that happened at the 11th hour. If we'd be having a much different conversation if that went up a reasonable amount. And again, we met at the summit where some very broad projections were made, and maybe the mistake or the part that was naive was to put forward a model to see what it was just a budget model, a projection saying 3% for level services for departments and 4% for health insurance, and these, just to look at what the ripple effect of that would be. And that was a 27 or 28 override was on the horizon using those fairly rosy projections. This year, I mean, the health insurance bill going up, we've got the budget for health insurance going up 17%. We're looking like we're settling around a 17.99% premium renewal, which in all my life I never would have expected we'd ever be there at 17 point, thinking that was good news, down from 25%. So that news in the 11th hour, that $500,000 or so additional that came into the model, not necessarily, we started the process with good faith with departments to ask for a level service budget. We asked for, if your budget didn't fit within 3%, what a 3% budget would be, what cuts would be required in your budget. And then your ideal budget that you presented at the summit before as you said, it was kind of a crazy message that was had, was what are your long-term needs? And those were included all the revenue and all the enhancements that, that were talked about. So we started moving forward with the departments with level service budget. If we didn't plug in that provision for union wage negotiations, we would have been around a 3% for town departments. So there's not a lot to be gained from, we'd have to make a lot of cuts to town departments to bring that within 3%, or we'd have a potential deficit with the union contracts that are currently under negotiation. So if we cut that out, I think that would be about 3.6% for the town departments. And to be fair to them, nobody did anything intentional thinking that they were going to bankrupt the town by putting in, a 3.6 and not taking voluntary cuts in their department. We literally didn't ask them that through the administrator. Another item that increased was the non-excluded debt service, where we had to start providing for debt that we're issuing that was just in short-term debt for a couple projects that were approved. Not big projects, but that was a $250,000 increase in the budget as well. So these things some of them are fixed costs that go up every year. We projected for some of them at the summit, like we knew about the debt service coming on, we knew about the retirement assessment, which we actually did a little bit better than what we had projected at that was probably the one thing that was rosier than what we projected. But it wasn't necessarily, we'd have to look at a lot of departments to affect a substantive change to the budget this year. But no, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. There's a warning sign with the levy capacity that's left at all. But I just wanted to put that in context with, there was no departments that came forward and were obstinate about no, we're demanding increases in our budget. That they were simply rolling forward, what would it cost to do the same services that they're doing currently? And like I said, it was meant to begin a policy discussion on what we would add later, not what we would need to delete from departments. So that's I just kind of want to put that in context out there, that was how it played out this year with the timing.
Thank you.
Jason, I recognize all that kind of thing, and I recognize the level of effort that the department heads have gone through to get to here. And I recognize the impact of increasing costs of health insurance. It's just, again, that balance, because at the end of the line, it's the homeowners of Northborough who are facing, and they've got to make it fit. There's no one they can pass their costs on to after that. So we just need to be more careful with that, I think. Mm-hmm. And yes, this is going to be painful. Everyone is facing increasing healthcare costs. It's not just the town of Northborough. Everyone is being hit with that.
Yeah, Bob. So do you want, go ahead and come up, and I'll get you after Bob.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what I said before. I says, everybody's talking about the 11th hour. Well, there's still another hour left. Why can't we go back and look at some things and say we can cut some of these things out? Why are we all conceding the fact that we can't do this? Why can't we? Jeff is saying, we're doing this again. Why do we have to do it again? Well, let's go back and have somebody fix it.
Just my opinion is, I think we can attack I think we can maybe have a bigger impact through the capital improvement plan and other articles than through the operating budget, because the operating budget, I trust Jason's expertise, and I think what he's saying is, we're not going to find a line item that's going to really, it's not going to get us anywhere. It's not going to really move the needle. We'd have to decimate a department to move the needle, I think is what I'm hearing, because there's a couple huge line items that are driving this. And so I think the operating budget is probably not the place where we're going to be able to do make any real impact without a recommendation.
But we don't want to try? We don't want to make an attempt to look at it? Just like what Scott was saying, maybe one more time and try to take a look at it?
Well, last year we took our vote so it was done and in the books, and then we did at a subsequent meeting, we did a vote to reopen it, and we changed votes, right?
No, we had left some
Right, but didn't we also change one because we got new information? I thought we did. Maybe
I think from time to time, you can publish a report that says the committee did not act on this by the time of printing, and the committee will deliver its recommendation at town meeting.
We
I
had a
remember
couple
John
on that
Kader
one.
making adjustments. Oh, okay.
Let me get to Tim first, if that's all right. Okay, Tim, go ahead.
This is just a question. I don't know who the best person to address it is. I think part of the problem too is when you go to town meeting and you present a budget, the residents are presented a single option. This is the option, either you take it or you don't. Is there any way to present a budget that is a level budget versus a budget that has cuts that reduces the tax burden so that residents can see what that looks like? Because if residents see that in order to actually make an impact on their tax bill, you're gonna have to cut what, Jason, $5 million out of the budget for them to see a noticeable difference?
Well, quick statistics and math on the budget. Every $47,000 amounts to 1 cent in the tax rate, and 1 cent in the tax rate to a $700,000 valued home is $7. So 50 grand, $7 from 966.
On an annual basis.
On an annual basis, correct.
Right, but if you go in and show people a budget where, all right, we're cutting things in order to manage the budget so that we don't hit these doomsday scenarios, and this is what it means to you. It means that education makes up 65% of the budget, so 65% of those costs are going to go to education. We're going to have to reduce the police force. We're going to have to reduce the fire. The DPW is going to get, like, if people see that, and then you say, for all of that, you're going to save $400 a year, maybe people will be comfortable with spending the $400 a year because they know what that $400 gets them. Now they don't. Now they have no idea.
Yeah, I think, Tim, you're talking about some of the things we've been doing lately, where individual items and showing that dollar amount. I think continuing that, and in the next budget cycle.
But I don't think it could be dollar amounts. I think it needs to be, because again, it's, if you're a resident, I don't know if you understand the dollar amounts as much as those that are involved in it. If you say you're going to cut education by $3 million, and that $3 million is X amount of teachers and these programs that we just can't afford anymore, and by doing that, we save each household in the town of Northborough, whatever it is, $240, whatever the number is. Is it worth $240 to you to have these services or not?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, is being able to
But
present
just to
those
go in and say,
options.
well, we gotta make all these budget cuts because the budget goes up by 6% every year or 8% every year is, you talk about us having to make decisions in a vacuum. You're gonna go to town hall and ask or town meeting and ask everybody at town meeting to make a decision in a vacuum too. Like if you're gonna, like, I think they need options.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the structure that would need to be baked in for next
Right.
fiscal, is so that those kind of decisions can be made, both in the creation of the budget, but we may find ourselves in a options, sort of value for money bit to be able to know how to structure different articles to avoid, or to craft the right pathway through avoiding an override.
Well, those are policy decisions
Yep.
that aren't part of our charter.
Yeah.
Let me give Susan a chance for a comment.
Susan Sartori, 465 Green Street. I like all the things that I'm hearing from all of you, and I understand the angst you're going through trying to make a decision about going forward. Terry's right. We'll end up at a voting booth, and the people will be making decisions arbitrarily. And as Tim is saying, wouldn't it be good that they would know what it is they're going to lose if you come up against it? I'm stood up to actually say to you, the economy's not great right now. It's not very stable. People are scared. A lot of people in this town are mad about the fire station and the debt. I am not one of them, but I'm saying that is the truth of the matter. You may very well walk into town meeting and have somebody stand up and pass a motion to reduce your budget by $1 million. So I ask you to at least think about having a strategy in place if that should occur, because I hope we'd all be smart enough to figure out if the people want to pass it, we've got to show them what it's going to look like, and then it's their decision to make. Because politics are in everything. We've got a contested race this year. You know, this could happen on town meeting floor. Plan for it, will you?
Okay.
Yeah, Mitch, please.
Thanks, Scott. Mitch Cohen, 12 Whitney Street, and member and chair of the Select Board. I don't want to intervene in your discussion because you need to have that discussion. Procedurally, the Select Board is going to be executing the town meeting warrant this coming Monday night. If you have recommendations on changes you think we should consider, to whether it be to the town budget or to anything else, tonight is the best night, given what's left, for you to make those recommendations, so those can be considered by the board. A subsequent meeting of your board to make a different recommendation to town meeting, you can do that. It becomes awkward at town meeting, because there will be a warrant booklet that will say this, and then usually the motion is that, and then there would be an amendment and so forth. I appreciate the time crunch we are under. I appreciate that somebody mentioned the fact that we were without a town administrator and we had to do that transition this year. I am not happy that we are where we are with the timeline. I expected the select board would have a lot more time to hear about the budget and make decisions and choices. This feels, as I think you said, George, this feels just like last year. It really does. None of us wanted to be in that situation. And I'm reasonably confident if we didn't lose a town administrator and had to hire somebody else, we wouldn't be there, but this is kind of where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Okay, just to kind of wrap a couple concepts up on the board, is there an appetite to pass over this item now, give the administrator a chance to work on some things and conduct an additional meeting?
This is another question. What if we, as a board, recommended a budget that was 1%, 2% less than this? As, that's our recommendation. And, Susan mentioned somebody could stand up and do that at town meeting. How do we feel about that?
The specific of what we'd recommend, I'd want to wait until we got more information and had more thought from administration. So I'd rather not be prescriptive on that and say, okay,
I'm not looking at this as kind of going through the budget and saying, yes, right there, cut this, because I don't think we have enough information and we could do that. But we can look at it and say, we think the budget should be capped at X, and then let the policy issues be hashed out by the people that deal with the policy issues. I've often been in these situations in my career where it's, revenues are not what we're expecting. You need to, all your department heads, you got to get together and you need to trim X kind of thing. And it's horrible, and it's not very, it's not a position you want to be in often. I'm wondering, part of what we could do is to say, let this go and deal with it as a bigger deal next year. Or we can look at it and say, let's back off a little bit this year. Let's see if we can kind of come back. And so there would be some pain in kind of renegotiating that. Is that something we could do as a board? Just say we have a recommendation. We don't have any specifics, but we're concerned, more information won't help me because I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of this is the budget and this is the impact on the average homeowner, and this is a lot. And how do we?
Yeah, let me restate then.
Okay.
If we had another meeting, it would be to review further budget changes from the
Okay.
administration. So let me, rather than phrase it as more information, it would be to give additional time for the town administrator to propose additional budget changes. That's why we would hold off making a recommendation on this current budget.
Okay.
That'd be a way to frame it.
I worry about that from a standpoint that you're putting out into the town meeting that I don't want to be as open-ended as that, frankly.
Okay,
I
yeah.
think that adds a lot of issues of people writing up amendments and stuff. Matter of fact, from a protocol perspective, once the article is made, the Appropriations Committee has first dibs on making any amendments to the warrant article when it's financial. No one else can make an amendment until we say yes or no, or we make an amendment. You could do that. We could have another meeting with the administrator to see if there's any cuts that she would, or any changes that she would want to make after the warrant's passed. We could say, and in our narrative, we can say, yes, we've approved this, or yes, we haven't approved it, but I think you need to make a decision one way or the other for the booklet, and then you can say in the narrative, but we also continue to have deep concerns about the total level, and we continue subsequent to publication to work with town administration. Something like that would be acceptable to me, and I think would kind of smooth the waters as to how town meeting might run.
So I also would like to dispose of this tonight. I would like to I would go one way or the other tonight.
Okay, so let's try to then put that in such a way that, because we've got a motion on the table, right? And through our discussion and through some further discussions, we may find that there's other reasons to have another meeting.
Okay.
And further, so if it's the consensus of the committee that we're ready to vote on this motion on whether we recommend approval, or vote on the motion to recommend approval.
So,
of this article.
Mr. Chair, I know one of the unofficial deadlines is for the printer.
Yep.
To get this into the town meeting book, and I believe the drop dead date is the 8th.
Yeah, and I'm not
So-
concerned about the book, because we have the options to say, the vote was not taken as at the time of publication. We've done that before. So I'm not,
Correct.
I'm not
That-
worried
so-
about the logistics of the booklet.
What I'm trying to suggest is like, that's the options you have in front of you.
Yeah.
You can make a recommendation or not make a recommendation with the understanding that it'll go in the book, that the recommendation will be made at town meeting.
Okay. So one last opportunity, if we don't want to vote on this article right now, we can retract, otherwise we will go to a vote. Okay, that has to be a roll call vote. So on the recommendation for Article 5, the town budget, Bob,
No.
George,
No.
Jeff,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
and Scott is also an aye. So we are 4-2 on Article 5. Article 6, Northborough K-8 Public Schools. Is there a motion on the recommend to approve that article?
Mr. Chairman, I move we move to approve Article 6, the Northborough K-8 public school budget.
Second. Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion?
Well, this is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
There's nothing to
Bob.
add.
This, it's kind of like rehashing what we just talked about anyway, so we're in the same boat, right?
Right, and so similar position, feedback, guidance to the superintendent and school committee.
I think what we discussed applies to town administrator and school superintendent in total. I'll just go back into history when you said we could all vote no. There was a time when the Appropriations Committee just voted no on every single line item until
Was that
we got
right?
people to move stuff. So I'm dating myself in a lot of, it's even before Jason got to town, for crying out loud. So, yeah, we only get one tax bill.
All right, anything else?
So
Jason,
I
do you have-
I would just add that the K-8 budget's 2.99%. They superintendent, I know they went back and revised their budget a number of times, probably trying to get to the 3% goalpost that people thought we had at the onset of the budget. But, so I'd add that the superintendent did hear the concerns at the summit, and they tried to respond to that with this budget request.
So they're within 3%.
Yeah, 2.99.
Okay.
No further discussion, we'll do a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
No.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. We are 5-1 on that one. Article 7, the Northborough Southborough Algonquin Regional School District Assessment. Is there a motion?
Chairman, I move that we vote to approve the Northborough Southborough Algonquin Regional School District budget.
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Terry. Yeah, and it'll be the, kind of the formal bit is like the recommend that approval of, yeah. Oh, great. Discussion on the regional school district budget.
Were they within the 3%?
Overall, I don't know where their budget is, so people understand the regional school district's an entity of their own. They have the same health plan. We're part of a JPA, the Joint Purchasing Arrangement for the health plan. So we have one shared health plan amongst Town of Southborough, the regional school district, and Town of Northborough. So that health insurance increase, they have that factored in there, and their assessments at 5.33%.
Not seeing any,
I'm-
oh, go ahead, George.
I'm voting no, just to make sure that it's not unanimous. And so, and I'm early on, so that I just don't, I think sending this forward, but making clear that it's not unanimous is also important for raising the issue. So, I'm just,
I agree. I get it. That's good.
Right.
We appreciate it.
All right, this one will be a roll call vote as well. Bob?
This one's a no.
George?
no.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That is 4-2. Assabet Valley, Article 8. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee recommend the approval of Article 8, Assabet Valley Regional Technical High School District School Assessment.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll do this a roll call. Bob?
Aye.
George?
No.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 9, Water, Sewer, and Solid Waste Enterprise Funds. Is there a motion?
Are we
It's just a great, it's just, we don't have the article language. This is just to
Let me go to it.
approve the enterprise funds existence for another year.
There should be a number here that's missing. It says NA, but
Yeah.
there's an article, there will be an amount.
It's the ones that are in the model, right? It's the,
Yes.
It is what it is, and it doesn't impact the tax levy because it takes care of itself. It impacts the
With the
assessments
exception
on-
of the solid waste subsidy, that has a taxpayer impact to it. But the rest of it is ratepayers that are paying the,
so it's a grand total of 7,223,
Okay.
7,223,000.
yes, correct.
That's what we see towards the end of the budget summary table, the last block.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just would advise the town administrator to carefully look at the solid waste subsidy. We discussed that in some of our hearings. It's, we haven't changed the price of the bags, 5 years plus. I find that to be incredulous to me, but, I mean, so at least we know we can possibly get some savings for the levy limit cap next year.
Right.
And we'll get some free cash as they increase the price during the course of the fiscal year. That's the way I'll look at that one, and so that would be my discussion.
I would just add that within the, you're not wrong with your commentary about looking at the price of the bags. I know they were, when they were first adopted, you probably remember that because it was before my time when they first adopted the bag fees. They were relatively high compared to neighbors. They're probably low compared to neighbors, it being, I think it's $3.75, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what the fee was for the small and the large bags. But we're trying to get through the long-term contract with the Wheelabrator, where a policy decision can be made whether we exit the solid waste business altogether or not. But anyway, that it was, I think the thought was that the program would be kept alive to the extent that it is, because if we go up too high on the bag fees, people will seek private services, and so they don't have to have the headache of buying the town bags and using a town bag or something to that effect to keep it as viable as possible through the end of that contract. But that contract runs through 2027, from what I understand.
Understood.
And I know work is being done.
Appropriations when we did that.
Yeah, I don't know when the work will be completed, but I know the survey started in terms of looking at the bag fees as a result of the comments that were made about the bag fees.
Good to hear. Thank
They
you.
haven't been raised since inception, yeah. It was?
Was it once?
25 cents. It was the longest conversation at town meeting. Passed a multi-page
I don't remember that.
budget, but we argued over the 25 cents.
Thanks, Fred.
Okay,
The beauty of town
stay
meeting.
corrected.
Mr. Chair, I don't think we have a motion yet.
I was just going to say, I didn't do the motion on that yet.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee vote to recommend the water, sewer, and solid waste enterprise funds for fiscal year '26.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any other discussion? We'll do this the same order. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That passes unanimously. Article 10, revolving funds, authorization of expenditure limits. And let me just look at that.
Yeah, they've been proposed to be unchanged from the prior year. And there's legislation out there so that this article won't have to be acted on every year unless there's a requested change for the year. That was the intent when the law changed back with municipal modernization in 2016, but they never, that part, there's a flaw in the writing of the law, so we have to continue setting an annual expenditure limit for the revolving funds.
And, Mr. Chairman, how many revolving funds do we have?
7, I
Seven?
believe. Yeah.
Could you, which ones are they again? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay.
I forget to.
Sewer, solid waste.
The one that with the most activity is the fire department's ambulance
Right.
revolving fund.
Right.
That's run through the revolving funds.
Right.
Off the top of my head, we have a revolving recreation fund that's not encompassed here. That's authorized under a different set a law, so that does not need to be reauthorized. But we have the fire department, the health department vaccination fund, the animal control for dog licenses run through that fund, the senior center, so the WRTA program and the food program, and they have a revolving program. The library has a very small revolving fund. Family Youth Services is largely inactive in charging program fees, but they could, and there's a revolving fund there as well, and I think that's all of them. But they'll be listed in the warrant book, but there's no changes from the prior year. In total, the expenditure limit on the outset is $1.3 million, with the largest being the fire department.
Thank you.
Great. Is there a motion for Article 10?
Move to approve the Article 10 revolving funds authorization of expenditure limits.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Any other discussion? Great, let's do it the same bit. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 11, Appropriations Committee Reserve Fund.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of Article 11, Appropriations Committee Reserve Fund.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Any discussion on that? Sounds good. We'll do the roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That passes unanimously. Article 12 is the Stabilization Fund contribution. Is there a motion?
Move to approve Article 12 stabilization fund contribution.
Thank you, Bob.
Second.
Thanks, George. Any discussion on that? This will be a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That passes unanimously. Article 13, Establishment of a Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that the committee, I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 13, Establishment of Special Purpose Stabilization Fund.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob.
This is one, I just want to say that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jason, this is one because we have the SAFER grant. And this is to, so this I think is just, I think, I wanted to say publicly, this is very important. And I think that anytime we ever accept a grant that covers salaries for a portion of time, and we're going to be stuck at the end of that time, we should never accept a grant unless we're going to establish one of these stabilization funds. I think this is a very good proactive budgetary move that we should always do going forward. So I'm really happy to see this in here.
Thanks for reminding me, Jeff. I forgot what this was about. Thanks. Yeah.
Any further discussion?
I would just, I don't disagree with that. I would say that it would need to come from free cash, though. There's no point in it coming from taxing it and putting it into a fund. That's, so as long as there's.
To be clear, it is drafted with the intent that it comes out of free cash.
Yes, I knew, for this year it is, right? So.
Correct.
And then next year, it depends on how much free cash you have, right?
Yes.
Yes, and then it depends upon if we want to change the free cash policy, because right now it's 500, we can use $500,000. I think it's the greater of 500,000 or 1% of the budget.
I believe it steps down to $500,000 as a maximum.
Okay, so
And we've used that for a
it's the
number of
lesser of
years.
500 or 1%.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I also think from a policy decision, given that that was set in 2010, when the budget was probably 40 million,
Yeah,
and now
it
its total spending is 85 million, that there might be some room for, especially if we're going to have 2.5 problems. You don't want to fund operating expenses necessarily with free cash, but if we could use some of it to avoid 2.5, then maybe it's worth having a policy that is a little bit more generous. And you always should do that in consultation with our bond folks, et cetera. But just given the fact that it was set in 2010, it might be an opportunity to evaluate it for future purposes.
Well, during those conversations with the bond folks, it's always kind of a relieving thing to say to them is that this is taking up a smaller and smaller portion of the budget, only because any use of free cash toward the operating budget is viewed as a quote structural deficit, which sounds scary, but at $500,000, it's less of a risk to set the baseline there rather than have it increase. But to your point that was 1% at one point, and now it's, going to be a continuously smaller amount that.
It's worth revisiting. That's all I'm
Yeah.
suggesting, Jason.
No, thank you for the comments.
Because I also think that the bond folks also look at how much room you have under the 2.5 cap as well.
Yeah.
So it becomes a trade-off and just something worth evaluating from a policy perspective.
Excellent. With no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 14 is senior tax relief. And I think we have the wording for that later on.
Yeah, that's in the, if you go to the commentary section, there's some more wording that got added to that. I was crafting this wording into very recently, so there's two elements to this. We basically will look for and pass any measure of senior tax relief that's offered to us through the legislature. We passed 3 elements to it last year. One of them is an update. We update like an annual income limit that's based on the senior circuit breaker income limit that's published by the state. It's required under the tax deferral law, and that the section of that is the tax deferrals, whereby it works like if one of the elderly or senior it wants to defer their tax bill, they can. We have a lower, it functions like a reverse mortgage where the balance continues and accrues at a lower interest rate than unpaid taxes under the law. We're proposing increasing the income limit under that provision. There's a second element where a new local option was added through what's called the HEROES Act, which was passed in August 2024, and it's a benefit that would potentially, over time, benefit qualifying veterans, and we're proposing adding that. In the short term, they can't get multiple exemptions, but the better of the multiple that we offer, this may in the future pan out to be more beneficial to a veteran. So that's why we have that on here, because it was a new local option that was added over the summer.
Any discussion on Article 14? Is there a motion?
I move to accept the, recommend approval of Article 14, senior tax relief.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. That was Jeff, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Great. We'll take our roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. All right. We have our set of capital improvement program items for this year's budget. That'll get us from 15 down to 34. Ready? Everybody doing all right break-wise? We're okay? Okay, great. Let's go Article 15, police body cameras. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee vote to recommend approval of the capital expenditure for police body cameras.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, George. Any discussion?
I mean, only that I still view the capital improvement plan as a place where we can perhaps do a little bit of cutting this year, and I'm a former police officer, and I'm all for the police department. This is an item that in this particular town, I don't think is all that necessary. It's a little bit of a luxury item, so I plan on voting no for this one, and that would be why. It's not that I lack support for the police department, because I certainly don't. I'm all for their mission and our safety, and I think they do a tremendous job. I just don't think body cameras are needed.
And this reminds me of a question that came up on the side from some residents. And so, Jason, this might be something you can talk to. It'd be the interplay in terms of these capital items and the funding source being free cash. And some of the items, particularly one item later on, that is a mixture of borrowing and free cash. Would that article be structured such that if a capital item somewhere else was not approved at town meeting, that free cash allocated to that would go to, or could go to, reducing the borrowing on an article that had borrowing in it?
Yes. Yes, I mean, we can't overspend the free cash that we have available to us, but if one of these articles doesn't pass, it could be reallocated toward the other article. Somebody would have to be present with the ability to make a motion to do so, to amend the article, but yes, it would reduce the borrowing authorization.
And
It could be potentially reduce the borrowing authorization if somebody so moved that way.
And I don't think we have the language for 29 in front of us. So I don't know exactly how that article is written and how the motion would be written for town meeting. But
Yeah, I can tell you if you.
And that's really what, this is the question that came to me, is if there was not, if one of the other items was not approved, could 29 be amended to then use that free cash, and thereby lowering the borrowing amount?
Yeah, so basically, we took the free cash plan, and the way the capital plan worked, the financial planning heard from all of the about all of the articles that were being proposed through that process. At the end of it, there was $913,000, $355 above what we had targeted for being available from free cash. So this article is $1.1 million, and as it's been written, $913,355 is the borrowing authorization. $186,645 is proposed to come from free cash. So should there be more free cash available, we could apply that to this article and shift the requisite amount over.
Okay. And there might be some mechanics in that in terms of amendments to the
Yeah,
motion.
somebody would have
floor, that
to
sort of thing.
make a
But
motion to.
I just wanted to bring that up because that was a question that was asked. Okay. Thank you for that. Article 16, police, two
We
cruisers.
we're not done with.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't vote on, 15. See, this is why it's Ted. You guys got to keep me in check. Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 15? Excellent. We'll do the roll call vote. Bob?
Why am I was first? No.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That is 4-2, if I have tallied correctly. All right, now Article 16, police cruisers.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee recommend approval of Article 16, the police department, 2 cruiser replacements.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's do our roll call. Bob was tired of being first. Let's go, Jeff.
But we're kidding.
Let's go, Jeff. Aye.
I don't mind the pressure.
George.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Tim.
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That is 6-0. Actually, that'll mess me up if I
Yeah,
do it, so we'll get back to
Be
the
comfortable.
normal.
Do what you gotta do.
Article 17, ambulance replacement.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee vote to approve Article 17, the ambulance replacement, and to do so via the debt available or a debt under the enterprise fund.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I had missed that meeting, and I was wondering if we could rehash what happened with the ambulance again? Is there a quick minute?
Oh, in terms of the
Why do we got to replace it?
maintenance and the failures. So there were engine and other equipment failures on some of the existing ambulances. So the chief took us through that story and the ultimate being able to borrow a vehicle from another town, and then also trade in the broken units and use that money to get, what's the name of the automatic CPR compression device? I can't remember the name of that device. So they were able to recoup value from the broken ambulances.
Okay.
Do a borrowing of equipment to get us through, and just took delivery on the new one that was ordered in 2022. That new ambulance just came in.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you.
So the problem we're facing is the length of time that it takes to get some of this equipment. It could be approved, and it could be years before,
okay.
after the order is placed, that we actually receive it. The fire department maintains 3 ambulances. They have 2 running at any given point, and they have a backup. They've had a series of equipment failures and so forth. So basically, this one here is probably not going to be seen for another 2 years after the approval of this. It's proposed as debt because the ambulances are paid for out of the ambulance revolving fund. And again, we plan to replace an ambulance every 3 years to stay on a 9-year cycle with the ambulances.
So there's potential for this debt to go up, because the prices will go up in a couple of years too, right? Is that?
Well, no, I mean, what we would do is we would place an order and lock in a price
it in, okay.
in
All right.
present day value, but it could be a long wait for us to get the equipment. And having the authorization allows us to sign the contract for the order.
Okay.
I would say that the price of this equipment has inflated greatly over years. I mean, I think
Right.
a couple of years ago, the last authorization was about $285,000 for an ambulance. So that's another thing that's rippling through, is that the cost of inflation that flows through these capital articles is that they're going up at a higher rate than inflation. And so that's another thing to be conscious of.
So this could increase then?
In the future,
Yeah.
but I
guess we
have
have to do this
to
anyway.
assume that they have good numbers now, so if we placed an order, that the appropriation would be sufficient to order
Okay.
that ambulance.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I apologize for the question.
Oh, no problem.
That's
Glad I
good.
was able to.
Any other discussion? Let's do the vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is also an aye. Article 18, personal protective equipment for the fire department. Is there a motion?
For discussion purposes only, I move that the committee consider recommending Article 18, the fire department personal protective equipment.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Discussion.
I mean, again, I admire our fire department very much. This is the one the chief said himself that he could do without. They have personal protective equipment. This gets everybody brand spanking new, couple sets and all that, and gets everybody, but they could do another year with what they've got, and I think it's good for us to let them do that.
Any other?
And I believe the
With,
Financial Planning Committee also voted
Unanimously,
not to approve this as well, so.
So
Could I just say, if this happened to go to town meeting, and again, if the recommendations are read that say unanimously everybody recommends against it, and people say, oh, I still want to vote for it, if it sat here, there would be nothing forcing anybody from the fire department to order the equipment faster than they already intend to. It would just be money set aside in this article funded from free cash. So it could potentially have the effect of creating a fund outside of taxpayer funds that would provide for this equipment in the future. But again, that would be the outcome of, if people aren't in favor of this article, but people overwhelmingly were at town meeting, it might not be the worst thing in the world to have the money set aside for the future.
In fact, the chief should phase the purchase in so that there's not a spike for new
I think that's
equipment.
why it was not recommended, because the fire chief enunciated that he had a plan to buy a few sets every year from his operating budget rather than from an article all at once.
Great. Let's take our vote. Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No?
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is a no. That is 1 to 5. That was an aye, yes, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Article 19, town offices HVAC out of DPW. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 19, Town Offices HVAC System Updates.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion?
We can't let Jason melt.
Why? He has been for the last 20 years. I mean, it's a little one more year.
Can we just get him a fan?
It is very hot in here, I don't know.
Here tonight, yeah. Kind of, for our own, I think we're experiencing the results of this.
The one in my office seems to be working pretty well, but elsewhere in the building, I mean, I think it broke down in the IT department where all the town servers are running, and
Right, yeah.
it's a
I think I remember this
potential
discussion.
bigger issue than
I
just
think
my
air
office.
quality is also probably a large issue.
Correct, yeah.
I think I remembered this discussion that we had, but, I mean, if, the whole idea, if we're putting money into a building that, are we going to use it in the future, that kind of thing?
The
Do we?
foreseeable future,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, there's no changes then, okay.
Yeah, so I
I'm
think.
trying to move you to a more comfortable building.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate it, 'cause, I mean, we did have a long discussion about the feasibility project for the town hall. They designed a beautiful-looking building, but would that fit between the fire station, which was approved, and then in the capital plan for the Peasley Schools, the next big project that's upcoming? Would a town hall project that was to the scope of 50 million plus maybe another 10 million to renovate the old fire station into a community use building, that $60 million fitting within the next 10 years, it just did not appear realistic. So that was the outcome of, let's move forward with some of the repairs that were contemplated years ago to this building that we're currently in and have lived in for this period of time.
All right, let's do a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
No.
And Scott is an aye. That's 5-1. Article 20, roadway improvements. Is there a motion?
I'll move to recommend approval of Article 20, roadway improvements.
Second?
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, George. Discussion? Hearing none, let's go through the roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Passes unanimously. 21 for drainage and sidewalk improvement program. Is there a motion?
Recommend approval of Article 21, Drainage Sidewalk Improvement Program.
Thank you, Bob.
Second?
Thank you, George. Any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 22, 20-ton dump truck with spreader and plow. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the 20-ton dump truck with spreader and plow.
Thank you, George. Second? I'll second the motion. Discussion.
I didn't understand what this is for, the 20-ton truck. Seems like we contract out for about 90% of what happens in this town, so I don't know what, because this is a really big bill, so I didn't really understand what we're doing with this one.
I don't have in front of me the.
If no one remembers, it's okay.
What was the recommendation of on these next three articles, what was the recommendation of the Financial Planning Committee on these next three?
I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, it was 4-2.
4-2 on the 20-ton?
4-2 on this.
Yeah, it's to replace a dump truck. The biggest dump truck that they have is what that equipment is replacing.
Yeah, and notes are that it's a 2005 model dump truck, and it's experienced significant structural deterioration kind of thing, including cross-member connection rot and front frame rail rot. So it's costly to maintain and unsafe to use.
20 years old, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, George, for having that.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thanks. That's good.
Any other discussion? We'll go for a vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. 23 is a 1-ton pickup truck with a plow. Is there a motion?
I move we recommend the 1-ton pickup and truck with plow.
Thank you, George. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Any discussion?
This was one where the Finance Committee was split 3-3.
From a representative of the Financial Planning Committee, could you give us some highlights as to the discussion as to why it was a 3-3 vote? What was some of the comments? I'm sorry, I should have gone through the chair.
Yeah, if I could, absolutely, absolutely. We appreciate you being here, Susan.
It started off that our chairperson had contacted Scott Charpentier to see if there was anything within the capital plan that he thought that he could go without, because we had found some of the department heads to be forthcoming in doing that. The police chief did. The fire chief was very honest about that equipment for the men. And so we were told that the earlier one that you just voted on, that Scott wouldn't mind giving that up. But the night of the vote, it turned out that Scott had called and said that it was really in very bad condition. The one that we're talking about right now, we're split because it's just a truck for the second in command for the highway department guy to drive. And so if you were gonna give or take something from some division, department, that would have been it. Okay.
Yeah, to
Thank you.
to add on to that, I know I was kind of the conduit of communicating to Scott through that, at that meeting. And we were reading the article's description, and it's talking about it being a safety issue to continue using it. And what he had been asked was, if there was one of these vehicles he could live without, it would have been that one. But the effect of it would have been that the Public Works Department would have had to, this was the only vehicle that's heavy enough duty to carry stone in it, and they would have had to make 10 trips with the 1-ton trucks instead of making one trip with the big dump truck. That's what his input had been, and it was describing some of the condition of the truck. If they continue to, I think they were proposing they weren't going to continue using it, but they could live without having it in the short term as a result of just using smaller trucks, a lot more smaller trucks. This one in particular, it was going to be an administrative vehicle, but it's more complicated than that because they pass down the vehicles for more abusive use as they get older. So that's the nuance to this, is that the frontline vehicle, the brand-new one, would be used for the least damaging use while it's on the front line. And then when a replacement comes in, it would be passed down to the next layer. And there's a succession plan for these trucks in place.
So
Noted in here, it says this is a 2012 model, and it's in poor condition and not expected to pass state inspection due to significant body and chassis deteriorations. So, again, it sounds like, well, it's 11 years old, or 12 years old kind of thing, so.
Yeah, I think the ultimate one at the end is that old. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, well, I don't mean to jump ahead to 24, but we got two one-ton, one's a pickup, one's a dump truck with a plow. So what's one used versus the other one? I mean, I guess I understand the difference between a dump truck and a pickup, but why does he need both two one-ton vehicles?
There's actually 3 one-ton vehicles, because you got one for water sewer as well, another one for pickup.
You're right.
I thought the one-ton pickup for water sewer, in advance of all these articles, I thought the one we're talking about now would be the one to nix, because the other one at least is partially paid through enterprise funds. So I thought that of the 2 one-ton pickup trucks, that made the most sense to recommend approval of, because it's also coming out of enterprise funds, but,
Which one's the oldest, I guess? I don't know.
well, the most
I won't
recent
pick that
model
up.
is the one we're talking about now. So the latest Model 1 is the one-ton highway pickup truck. That's
Okay.
right, that's on my notes anyway that I took
Okay.
going in tonight. That's the
thanks.
latest model. So I thought it was the most logical one to go without.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? We'll take our vote. Bob?
I'm gonna go with no.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No?
Tim?
No.
Tim's a no. I am going to vote aye on that, so that's a 1-5. Article 24, one-ton dump truck with plow. Is there a motion?
I move we recommend the one-ton dump truck with plow, Article 24.
Thank you, George. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion?
I guess just as a policy note for next year, seems to be a lot of reluctance on anybody here to either move or second these whole bunch of trucks. I just think that, and I'm sure the sentiment, we'll get more discussion at town meeting about the trucks than we will about anything else. And it's just the sentiment of town, like, you really need these trucks, it's just, either better marketing, better communication, what have you, but bells and whistles go off with these kind of expenditures, and I'm sure he's doing a great job, and, most of them are required and stuff, but there's just a lot each individual year, and it's just truck after truck after truck, and I know we beat the crap out of them, but really needs to be looked at. I'll second it.
Oh, we got the second.
second.
We got the second. Yep. No, we were in discussion. We're good. Any other discussion?
George, you have the year of that vehicle?
2016 truck.
It's newer than my car. Okay.
It's newer than my car. Finance Committee voted yes, five yes, 1 no.
Ready for a vote? Bob?
No.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That is a 4-2. Article 25, Aspet Hill Drainage and Roadways.
I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 25, Assabet Hill Drainage and Roadways.
Second.
I've had, may I address this one?
Yes.
I've had lengthy discussions with the residents in this neighborhood, and with the fire station being built behind a retaining wall that's backed by this hill, it's become really concerning. We had, I believe it was 250,000 allocated a year ago, and that ended up being diverted to, I think, it was like the culvert that, there was an emergency, they had to move money around, they had to do some budget, and so, but this neighborhood, you have, I mean, the asphalt's literally disappearing. I mean, there's risk of a sinkhole in this neighborhood. And I know this is not the town's fault, everyone knows that, but this money really, the engineering that this is gonna pay for, and this is, I think this 100,000 is probably a very small amount compared to what's gonna be needed to actually address this. And I know it's hard because it's not a large percentage of the town's residents that live in this neighborhood. I don't personally live in the neighborhood, but like I said, it's right in the center of town. It's right behind this fire station that we're just going to be, and I worry about what's this construction going to do to this hill when you start banging around, right? So Jason, I don't know if there's any kind of protection that can be put into a warrant article to essentially say, like, you can't use this for anything but this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the crafting of the article. This dedicates this piece of funding toward that project specifically. The other one, I think what you're talking about is we had the drainage article in the past, and what was intended was possibly getting started on this neighborhood, and it got diverted to a culvert that failed in another part of the town.
That was the Lincoln one, right?
Lincoln Street.
Yeah.
Lincoln Street was one that comes to mind. I off the top of my head, I'm blanking on the specifics around that. But when money's put aside for a roadway management plan or paving, it doesn't say exactly where it's going to be and can be used for an overall plan. Whereas I think the decision got made when we were working on the capital plan that, okay, well, to prevent anything from being used towards someplace else, let's get started on this project that has been discussed for a lot, and we can move forward with it, and it's dedicated to this neighborhood too.
So as the warrant article is written,
Yeah.
this will be protected money for this.
For that
this
neighborhood, correct.
use. Oh, that's
Yes.
wonderful. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That's all I have.
And to the point that the multi-year aspect of it, let's see, I'm looking for because we do it's 6 by charter, but we did do a 10-year capital plan, and the $100,000 is, in total, it's about 4.2 million over 10 years.
Yeah. But it could be a tragedy over there.
Yeah.
If it's not addressed.
Yeah, so the engineering work absolutely needs to
It
get
has to
done.
get done, yeah.
All right, let's take a vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Out of the water and sewer, 1-ton pickup truck with plow, Article 26 is our motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee vote to approve Article 26, a 1-ton pickup truck with plow for the water sewer, using the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion? We'll take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott. Scott is an aye on that. Passes 6 unanimously. Article 27, water main bridge supports. Is there a motion?
Move to recommend approval of Article 27, water main bridge supports,
Thank you, Bob.
the debt.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, or hearing none, we'll take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 28, the broadcast server for the cable access team. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 28, a Telview broadcast server for the cable group.
Thank you, Terry. Second.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion?
Does anybody watch, should we just let this roll till it dies and send everyone a Zoom link? I mean, does anybody watch this stuff?
My wife does.
Really?
Yeah. She gets upset when we do these meetings and we're not on Channel 30.
Ugh.
I watch them.
Because I told her, to make sure you text me if I say something.
No one in town meetings seems to be prepared when they show up. So, I don't know. I just think it's a waste of money. I would let it die with the dinosaurs.
But to that point, Jeff, we do have a franchise agreement with the two cable providers that requires that we do the PEG access programming. So we are required to provide the service. So the current server is at the end of its useful life. So this is the replacement to get us through to the end of, probably to the end of cable contracts at the end of the 10 years at the lifespan.
When's that gonna be?
I can't predict,
Okay.
but that would be up to cable customers in town choosing to no longer pay for cable.
Terry says we're still a customer in town.
Yep.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have some folks that watch. It's on in my house, too.
And to be clear, this is coming from the PEG Access Fund, like the purchase would be funded through that.
Yeah, it's not free cash, it's not,
No, it's from the cable receipts reserved fund.
Ah, okay. That makes it more palatable.
Go ahead, sister. Yeah.
I think the interesting point, part of all of this, to your point, is that,
Yes, there are people that are subscribing is going down. So he really needs to kind of spend the money that's coming in now to get this done. So that's what this is all about. He's going down by 10% each year in what he takes in, okay?
Thank you, Susan. All right, any additional discussion? We'll do our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. Article 29, Downtown Streetscape Project. Is there a motion?
For discussion purposes, I recommend that the committee consider whether or not to recommend approval of Article 29, planning the downtown streetscape project.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Let's discuss.
It's like a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. For $1.1 million, so I think that's about as crazy as it gets.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of points. One is that the last thing, when we're facing a Proposition 2.5, potential Proposition 2.5 override next year and having to make hard choices about
Basic services.
basic services to add to our debt services, it seems a little bit, not a good financial move, A. B, this amount of 1.1 million is only predicated upon receiving some unknown grants of another $1 million, which is still our taxpayer money. Let's just forget it's a grant. It's still coming out of our pocket somewhere. Northborough has looked like this for 45 years. There's no economic benefit to this plan. If there was, you'd have to raise, you'd need $50 million of new growth in the next 2 to 3 years and collect property taxes off of that over 5 years in order to pay for this. And at some point, you just have to say, do I need it or do I want it? I mean, it's one of those hard decisions that happen when you're not flush with cash, you're not flush with with a levy limit, 2.5 capacity, and you need to make hard decisions about what do I need to run this town? And I don't need this to run this town, especially if we're going to borrow money for it, and even if it was all free cash, no. I strongly urge the town not to spend this money, given our current financial situation. I think I said it better. You probably did.
I would say,
That's why you went to law school.
there is a need for seeding, some economic development, but at this time, and the choices that we're making, that sort of investment that would take that long to pay off is hard to make a recommendation. Any other comments before a vote? Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No.
Tim?
No.
And I am a no. Article 30, we get into the school department items. This first one for technology infrastructure.
Mr. Chairman, would it be okay if we did all these as a group? I'm not sure there's going to be much discussion on the total, the school department's capital improvements.
Yep. So if there's a motion for recommending approval of Articles 30 for
34.
technology, infrastructure through 34, which is the replacement design. So those would be, I'll make it easy and so somebody could do a so moved. 30 for technical infrastructure, 31 for playground repairs, 32 for the Proctor retaining wall and stair renovation, 33 for the stair replacements at Z, and 34 for the roof replacement design at Z.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott's and I. Thank you, Terry, for the consent agenda type combination there. Next set, we have community preservation funds that goes from 35 to 40. The first one of those is the affordable housing project. Is there a motion? For discussion purposes, I will.
For discussion purposes, I'll recommend the committee consider whether or not to recommend approval of Article 35, Community Preservation Fund Affordable Housing Project.
Great. I'm going to give you the second on that. I'll take the move because I beat you just to it. Let's discuss.
Okay. I was pretty transparent when we were hearing that presentation. We already have a pretty large problem by the public library with the existing neighborhood, the existing building that's there, and the lack of parking, just the overcrowding. And so adding another building is just not a good idea. And I also, just as we kick off all these articles, we've had the CPA for more than 5 years, and I think the town, and I said, I think we should look at whether it's wise to continue having CPA in Northborough. I think the town should really consider revoking its participation in the CPA and winding down after fiscal year '26, because, like I said, the presentations at town meeting are always very scant of detail, and they always make it sound like it's nothing. Oh, it's almost like free money. And then it doesn't include those price tags because we're not allowed to use it for a lot of things. And that comes out of other sources, which end up hitting us. And the best example of that is that dog park, which now is going to cost us money every year. And if you look at it, because it's been nothing but trouble since they've been trying to build it, it's still not done. And if you look at it now, it just looks like, I don't even know what it looks like. But it's going to keep costing us money now. Right now, I think 50 grand, and it's going to keep going up and up. So it's, anyway, I think we should consider the wisdom of even having CPA in Northborough. I think we should consider revoking it. It just has to be done in the same manner it was enacted and all that. And I think the town council can certainly look at doing that. As far as this specific one, though, it's just affordable housing is a great thing, but we're not under our 10%. We're okay right now. And if we're going to do it, I don't think it's wise to put all your affordable housing in one spot. I've never thought that. As a police officer in a town similar size to ours, I thought it was always better when affordable housing units were spread out and intermixed in the community. Dumping them all in one spot, especially right next to the public library, is just poor planning, and this is not, it's just not a sensible article.
I'm going to speak, and I have the exact opposite view.
Okay.
The Community Preservation Fund has been given us the ability to do a lot of great things in town and continue to do that. And then specifically, we're not okay when it comes to our 10% on affordable housing. So we are at risk right now. Every new residential is things like 5 lots off of a common driveway. So we very quickly will lose our 10% if we don't build some affordable housing. So it's critical for the town right now. It's critical in the state in terms of the need for affordable housing. And I'll just leave it at that. So I come at it from that perspective. Any other comments?
Do we know where are we over, 10%, or would we know that number right now?
10.4, something like that. And roughly, don't quote me, I'm just trying to recall. So we are very close. If we don't take advantage of every affordable housing opportunity, we risk that. And then what happens in that case is then by right, developer can come in regardless of the zoning and put a development wherever they deem fit.
Do we know the pipeline of affordable housing?
What's that?
The pipeline, future pipeline, anybody else building any?
It's very small. It's on the order of what we see here, where we're partner with like Habitat for Humanity, and or we do like we did last year with Whitney Street, where we designate some property that could be turned into affordable housing, that could lead to a partnership, either with the Northborough Affordable Housing Corp, and usually the things we do with Habitat through them. So it's a critical human need right now in terms of affordable housing, and it becomes a critical zoning issue for the town right now as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, during our discussions, when we reviewed this with the members of the Community Preservation Team, we had asked some questions regarding how, if there was overruns, I wanted to make sure that the warrant article was very clear. This is the amount.
All right.
There's no more. And I haven't seen the actual language for the warrant article that would provide us with that comfort level. On that basis, I'll recommend no until I see that. I might change my mind after I see the formal written warrant article. But I share some of the aspects of what Jeff said about, seems like every time we spend money, we're taking money off the tax rolls, or it ends up costing us more in our taxes than we thought it would be. And I don't think it's been a particularly, I'm not thrilled with the way it operates. Let's put it that way, so.
Jason, do you happen to have the language of this article?
Oh,
35?
yeah, I think I can find it. I would say too that this article would be coming into an agreement with an outside party, an outside entity, which is the Housing Authority is a separate entity from the town. It's not a department of the town. So this appropriation would involve us entering into a funding agreement with the Housing Authority prior to, and that would have to be determined what the deliverables were for us giving. We wouldn't just write a check to the Housing Authority. There'd have to be some mechanics behind the scenes for how that works. I'll find, give one moment, and I'll find the actual warrant article language, and I can.
And I don't know if you have available kind of previous agreements that would serve as a model for how that.
Yeah, I don't have one in front of me, but typically, that's been a concern of the fund, is when you make an agreement with an outside entity, there has to be some terms around it, because the Housing Authority is a public entity, but we've had affordable housing has been funded through the Affordable Housing Corporation, which is a private group. It's made up of a bunch of people from town that have been involved in town government here, but they could make decisions on behalf of the money and so forth without the town's knowledge or any control over it. So due to the Affordable Housing Corporation's articles from the past, we've had funding agreements with them for many years. Every time there's an appropriation, before any money transferred to an outside entity, we would have a funding agreement, and that's been the same practice that's basically been used with the Historical Society has gotten money through the CPA, and then the churches in town that have had CPA projects that have been for their building projects. If we want to continue discussion, I can, or if you want to.
Okay. I'd rather take a comment while you look at
and I'll look
the
for the
language.
language for the article.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, Mitch.
Thanks, Scott. Mitch Cohen, 12 Whitney Street. To be clear, I'm speaking as an individual here, not on behalf of any board that I serve on. In my former town, we had to deal with a couple of 40B projects. You don't want them. The percentage of affordable housing in Northborough has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking as typical residential developments, and houses have been built up. Not that they're getting built very, very fast, but they're getting built a lot faster than the affordable homes. The moment we dip below 10%, there's no option. Somebody's going to jump on us. Somebody's going to say, you know what, I want to build a high-density apartment complex on the golf course or on industrial land or anywhere where they can buy it, and they're going to do it, and it's going to suck. You have to stay ahead. I mean, Northborough is one of the few towns that is above the 10%. Please, we need to do everything we can to stay above that 10%. It's just not a pretty sight to go under that. Just look online for 40B, and you'll find town residents screaming about projects that are going in, and there's nothing you can do about them. Legally, the zoning board has to approve it, and that's it. And if they don't, they get sued and they lose. And there's not much else I can say about that. Regarding the location of this project, I happen to have served on the Library Board of Trustees for either 7 or 8 years. I don't remember exactly how long. As a trustee, I've never heard any complaints regarding the affordable housing project that's adjacent to the library. I'm not saying that there has been none registered, but certainly none has been major enough to bubble up to the trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch.
And I have that article in front of me, and if you want me to read it, I'm happy to read it. Article 35, to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $326,727 or any other sum from the Community Preservation Unreserved Fund, the sum of and I'm sorry, I'm reading the whole thing.
That's okay.
$279,863 or any other sum from the Community Preservation Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, and $273,410 or any other sum from the Community Preservation Fund revenues, for a total of $880,000 to the Northborough Affordable Housing Authority for the purpose of constructing 8 affordable low-income one-bedroom rental units for veterans, of which 4 will be first-floor handicapped accessible units at 26 Village Drive, with the disbursement and expenditure of said funds to be subject to a Community Preservation Act funding agreement between the town and the Northborough Housing Authority, or take any other action relative thereto. And so I would just make the commentary that the language with the funding agreement between the town and the Housing Authority is basically what the town has had control over, the agreements with the outside entities.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Let's go for a vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's a 5. Article 36, Conservation Fund. Is there a motion?
A motion to recommend approval of Article 36, Conservation Fund?
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, George. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, refresh my memory on this?
Yeah, so this is an allocation of that Community Preservation Act funding that goes into the Conservation Commission's fund that helps them acquire, or otherwise, lock in open space for conservation purposes.
Oh, okay.
So it builds up their reserve. The purchase of 432 Whitney, used up those reserves. So this moves money into that conservation fund for future purposes.
And it meets our requirements to spend that much money on conservation, right? By moving into this fund?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Because the act requires that. We have to spend so
for
much
open
on
space,
conservation,
yeah,
yeah.
10 space.
Yeah, so this
10
satisfies that by putting it in that fund.
Okay.
Could you just, is it an annual requirement?
There's an annual requirement within the CPA to spend 10% for each one, spend or reserve 10% for each one of the core purposes: community housing, which is affordable housing, open space, and what's the other one? Historic resources. So
So so the 10% of the total?
10% of the annually budgeted revenues. So for FY '26, that's 10% is $84,000. So to meet the requirement, $84,000 has to be spent or reserved on those three purposes. So
So if the article was 84,000, I would approve it. But at 200,000, I won't.
Well, if you don't use the total amount, doesn't it just go back into their fund?
In this case, the money would be transferred into the conservation fund. It's
Yeah.
a separate fund overseen by the Conservation
But if
Commission.
they don't use it all, doesn't it go back, or doesn't?
No, it can't be used for any other purpose.
Oh, it can't.
Only be used for Conservation Commission's purposes for open space. I get you in just a second. I just want to make sure Bob was all set with his.
Thank you, yes, you answered my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Fran.
I'm just reading the actual article, and it says that, that the $200,000 is to replenish the reserves that was significantly drawn down by the purchase of 432 Whitney Street. So that's why it's going into the account, as opposed to just the 10% that's required.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Yeah, so suppose the 10%, if one of the 10% thresholds was not passed in an appropriation at town meeting, it would be the requirement of the accountant at the end of the year to reserve it within the reserve of the CPA.
But the most we have to do is 84,000.
Correct.
And technically, it would then stay within the CPA funding, but in the open space reserves.
Correct.
Do we amend the article to 84,000? Or do we?
I wouldn't do that here.
I mean, I'd make the comment that we've always met the spending requirements with the appropriations by either spending or reserving the money. We've never had to do a unilateral journal entry to comply with the law at the end of the year, so,
Yeah,
for what it's well.
historically, these have passed. Any other discussion? We'll take our vote. Bob?
I'm going to approve it.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, George.
All right.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Terry?
No?
And Tim?
Aye.
And that is 5-1. Thank you. Article 37, Revolutionary War Monument. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee recommend approval of Article 37, Revolutionary War Monument.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Terry. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. 38, White Cliffs Design. Is there a motion?
I have a quick question before the motion. It's just, this is what Stephanie was saying, that in order for us to be able to be in a position to sell it, this is the part to study removing that one piece that's making it almost impossible to sell, the 1960s edition, right? That's what this is for?
Correct. It's to position the building to be in a better place to transfer or continue using, whatever that effect would be. It's not the non-historic portion of the building.
Got it. Okay, then I'll go ahead, Mr. Chairman, and move that the committee recommend approval of Article 38, White Cliffs design.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion?
So if there's a buyer that's going to purchase this, why can't we knock that off the price?
Well, in theory, if the designs had been done to do this work, it would increase the value of the property.
By a lot more than,
I wouldn't say, I'm not an appraiser, I don't know.
yeah,
but
is this a
in
one-for-one good thing to do, or?
And actually doing this design work would let you know what the actual demolition or costs would be, to know what value to attribute to a potential buyer.
I know, the point is that we're going to spend this money, or we're going to get this money back if we sell the property, we're going to get, you know, I don't know. Anything with White Cliffs makes me a little nervous.
We'll see what happens down on number 43 here. Any other discussion? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Mitch Cohen, I will, in this case, I'm speaking on behalf of the Select Board based on discussions that we've had at our meetings. I look at this money as something that makes White Cliffs more marketable.
Okay.
It will be easier to get rid of.
Okay.
If you want to phrase it that way, or repurpose, or whatever the case may be, by having this design started and done. I will say that we have an RFP open right now on White Cliffs. We'll get the answers back from that. We'll get proposals, I think, are due the 15th of this month. So by town meeting, we may have a little bit more information. I don't know what to predict about that. And it is, we don't know exactly what that'll turn into, but the biggest case is these additions need to come down. There are actually 3 additions that are non-historic, 2 of which have basically fallen over at this point. The other hasn't, but really needs to come down to preserve the historic aspect of the building. So this is just the design work, so an architect can determine exactly how they would come down and what would replace them. So the walls that would go in to fill in the holes, or the stairway, or the entranceway.
Okay, so this is a design, this is not the actual demolition.
Correct, this is just design work. The demolition, if the
So
town
does-
were to fund that, would come in some future year.
So we got more money coming in.
My hope is this increases the likelihood of someone taking it over and doing the rest of it.
And that was the recommendation of the White Cliffs Committee at the time, or?
I don't remember the timing. I know they certainly recognized that these additions needed to come down.
Okay.
But I don't know if they played a role in this recommendation, because their role ended about almost 2 years ago.
Okay, all right. I'll defer to that recommendation then. Okay.
Thank you, Mitch. It's like when you got to remodel a kitchen to sell the house because it just won't sell, and you do the new kitchen, it sells in 2 days. You know, it's like we have to do something to,
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. That's the way I was looking at it.
Okay,
Whatever.
I know.
Sounds good. Any other discussion? Let's take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. 39 is the White Cliffs Debt Service. 9 of 10? Do I have that right, Jason?
I believe
Or
it's
8 of 10.
8 of 10.
What we call this, we
8
gotta
to 10?
pay,
Oh,
gotta pay our
gotta
bills.
Say it anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 39, White Cliffs Debt Service, because we have to pay our bills.
Yep.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Terry. Any discussion? We'll take the vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott's an aye. Number 40 is the administrative fund for the Community Preservation Committee.
So, Mr. Chairman, I recommend that the committee recommend approval of payment of the administrative fund for the Community Preservation Fund.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? We'll take our vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is an aye. That finishes up our Community Preservation Fund. Next small one is 41 for the Historic District Commission in support of the 250th Revolution Anniversary. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll do the vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott's an aye. Number 43, lease or sale of town-owned building, otherwise known as White Cliffs.
Hallelujah.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no objection on the committee, I would move that the committee recommend approval of Articles 43 through 47, as they're all interrelated. We were given a presentation on the tax increment financing as an incentive to help us, encourage investment, and I think everyone is encouraging the town to sell these two properties, so I would recommend that we approve in one vote. We recommend approval of all these articles.
Is there any objection?
I would
Hold
object-
on.
I object to that because I haven't even seen the written warrant article of either one of any of these. My
Well-
understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's giving broad powers to the board, to the select board, to execute any of these things without any further town meeting action, without any further financial planning, appropriations, just kind of, yeah, guys, go ahead, if you think it's a good idea, go ahead. And I'm not, if that's what it says, I'm not comfortable with that.
Just to get some additional information, Jason, you have the current language on, let's go ahead and.
Yeah, so.
Let's go one by one then. Should I just move the first article then? I'll move the first article that we recommend approval, or I move that we recommend approval of Article 43, lease or sale of town-owned building, White Cliffs.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, yeah, Jason, if you have that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the warrant article, it is specific to the White Cliffs, but this is the article language to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to lease or sell the town-owned property known as White Cliffs located at 167 Main Street on such terms and conditions as the select board deems in the best interest of the town, and further to authorize the select board to enter into agreements and execute any documents necessary to effectuate the purposes of this article or take any other action relative thereto. So that it's a broad-based authorization, but to the end that there be more specifics, I'm not sure how that would, if we were going to do it, otherwise we'd have to go back to town meeting and.
That is typical though, isn't it, with real
Specifics.
property transactions?
I think when a property is determined to be surplus, that's typical that if you don't know the value of it per se on the market, that it would move forward in that manner, that's how the town disposed of the old fire station recently, and that's basically the answer. I see Mitch is at the podium.
Let me recognize Mitch to provide
Thanks,
some more.
Mitch Cohen, again, speaking on behalf of the select board, because we've discussed this extensively. Jason's absolutely right, this is exactly the language, probably word for word, if not very, very close to that for how we disposed of the old fire station. Ideally, yeah, it would be nice if we had a specific project and say, this is exactly what we will do. We don't have one as of now. I mentioned earlier that we have an RFP that will be opened. The proposal's received in a couple of weeks. By town meeting, we may have some idea for what this might look like, more than just something. The town administrator's recommendation was, let's put this on the warrant now, because our next town meeting that we know about is a year. And if we get an RFP we get a proposal in that looks really good, it's probably going to take a couple months to negotiate it and everything else anyway. They may not want to stick around another year, and it may not be worth the cost to us to schedule a special town meeting just for this. I appreciate the concern about an open-ended proposal. Ideally, I would not want to do that, but this is where we are in the schedule, this is the timeline. So this is our opportunity to at least potentially get it off the town's books and find a user of White Cliffs, whether that be sale or lease, or some combination of the two. And the same comments apply to 4 West Main. We haven't, as far as I know, we haven't issued the RFP yet. I know it's being worked on. So that's probably, it might be a month or two behind in schedule, but I anticipate that'll go through the same process.
And then a question, if, looks like bids are due the 15th or
Correct.
so.
Yeah.
Do you think it's realistic that there would be any significant information between then and town meeting that it would make sense for us even to defer, like these next two articles? Defer our vote, and we could do our votes based on new information just before town meeting?
From a formal sense, I'm going to say the answer is probably no. Let's say the proposals come in on the 15th, they get opened by the town administrator on the 15th or 16th. There is no select board meeting until, an hour before town meeting. Yeah. It's going to take a little bit of time to review them and sort of formally award and enter into negotiations to do that. It might become kind of obvious if a proposal comes in, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed based on, some may remember that there was a lot of press coverage about White Cliffs and the town's ownership of White Cliffs. It went as far as, I think, the Daily Mail in the UK. Some of that was intentional, the Daily Mail was not, but whatever, a lot of that press coverage generated interest. I have reason to believe there will be at least one pretty interesting proposal coming in. I hope the one I'm thinking about comes in, and maybe there are competing proposals that are also really interesting. So I have a greater sense of optimism than I do about White Cliffs than I have in the last few years. We have to sort of see how it all shakes out. And I know that's really generic and non-committal. That's just where it is. But to get back to your question, I don't think there's going to be anything that we can do to say this definitively is the proposal and all of the financial arrangements of that proposal.
That's fair.
It's hopefully going to be closer than we are now. Again, cross all your fingers and toes and everything else.
Thank you.
Sure.
What is roughly the cost of a special town meeting?
Boy,
I don't recall.
I know it's been kind of
14,000?
estimated at somewhere around $10,000 is what
$10,000.
was the, at one
What's the
time.
potential size of the White Cliffs deal?
Yeah, I mean,
We spent
it could be zero.
millions to buy it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, just so it's.
Yeah,
it's like-
I will cautiously try to set expectations. If anyone thinks we will both preserve White Cliffs and get all of our money back, we won't.
I'm not
yeah.
saying that, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm ballparking it, and
Yeah.
$10,000 does not sound like a prohibitive expense for something that's on the order of $2 million. So it may be worth
Yeah.
having a special town meeting for that.
Yeah. It may increase our bargaining position to have this done. That's one benefit of doing this at this time. It's about 10 grand. It certainly is a small amount relative to the amount of money we have already invested in White Cliffs.
Yes.
I wouldn't think about it in comparison to anything we might receive. As a comparison, the only proposal we got last time involved us paying the taker of the property $800,000. We rejected that proposal for a variety of reasons, but that, don't set expectations the town's going to get wealthy selling White Cliffs.
I'm not doing that. I'm
Okay,
just
I
saying.
appreciate that.
if The question is sort of blanket to the select board, whatever kind of thing, versus doing this more transparently, maybe it's worth the expense to
Well, I
do
guess
it
the
more
fair point there is like, the one thing I would be afraid of is a lease. I'm afraid of continuing to own it. Any of these things. I think the town should not be a landlord, period. The town should not be a landlord. So the words "or lease" in the warrant article concerned me a little bit. I was looking to see if we could strike those words and.
I will say that in reviewing conceptually similar projects that have gone forward, a lot of them are long-term leases, like 99-year leases or 75-year leases. I think if you're talking a 3-year lease, yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah, but I practice a lot of bankruptcy. I mean, it's, we're still stuck, right? Like, it just would be really good to just have it off the
Get rid
books,
of the
break the
stuff.
ties, get it out,
And I will say that the RFP does include lease or purchase. So we may get leasing proposals, and personally, I would hate to turn them down if it's a lease option from, say, an established firm that has done these before and has a history, and probably for tax benefits, are looking for a long-term lease versus a purchase. The devil would be in the details of that lease, of course. I would expect, again, not having discussed this with the board yet and not having reviewed any proposals yet, I would expect that if there was a long-term lease, that would, I forget the triple something or another, where they are responsible for the whole darn thing.
Right.
And they're not going to be coming to us and say, hey, the HVAC system isn't working, fix it. No, it's going to be on whoever's taken use of that building.
Mr. Chairman, from a procedural perspective, we're supposed to give our recommendation to town meeting about financial articles. There's no dollar amount here.
Well, this article would have a financial impact. I mean, there's potentially, it's a town-owned asset, and the town would be either disposing of it or entering into a line. So there's the ability to.
Trying to get out of it, Jason.
What's that? You're trying to get out of it, in opinion. Oh.
You want your HVAC, you gotta throw us a bone.
I'm gonna vote no at town meeting anyways, but I am not comfortable that a real property decision is, or even a TIF, that we recommend something that we don't know anything about. I mean, I don't know how you do that, as an appropriations board, right? If town meeting wants to give them all that, the right to do whatever they want, that's obviously in good faith and in the best interest and all the good legal jargon. But I'm not sure what we telling the town people to do that. Oh, yeah, that's okay, you should do that. I mean, I don't know how you do that.
Susan, did you have?
That's a personal opinion. Could I speak?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just, come to the microphone so it gets on the recording.
Susan Sartori, 465 Green Street. This bothers me a lot as a person that lives here in town. I mean, there's no structure to this, there's no process to it, there's no information, and you've got a board that's going to be in flux with an election that's going to decide to do a negotiation. And you're going to go to town meeting and ask people to just give carte blanche when we already told them we got to tighten our belts and we're worried about this and we're worried about that. Again, this is kind of a political situation that we're getting ourselves into. I really don't want to see us sell anything until we understand it better. I mean, what is the process that the Board of Selectmen is going to follow? Or is there going to be an open, a public meeting so that residents can hear about what the deal is? We don't know. None of that is being told to us. If they're going to do this and they want approval for it, they better have a better plan to be able to explain to the town voters, is my suggestion.
Interesting.
Any other discussion?
I see there's competing thoughts, and to be honest, I'm torn in my own head because the nature of real estate transactions and the fact that a willing buyer might only be a willing buyer if the deal can be done. And if it can't be done, it's not expedient, then they're out. And also the fact that I have very little regard for the body that is town meeting, because it's barely even represents the town's people. It's an emotional rabble-roused group of 1% of our population. So I don't really think they're not much of a gatekeeper. I think the Whitney Street property is proof of that. That was absolutely silly. So I don't think much of them as a gatekeeper either. But I wish that the town administration had some kind of say on it. I wish there was some kind of check and balance with career town, government, and not just the elected town government. I wish there was a way it could be structured a little differently. I don't know that a special town meeting, that would do nothing to make me more comfortable, because like I said, that bunch, whatever. I don't, that's not a gatekeeper. So, but I would love to see a warrant article crafted that would give the town administrator, has to have consent and agreement of the town administrator. That would make me feel a whole lot better.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah.
Mitch, you're probably going to say it better than I was.
Yeah,
gonna try to-
our town charter gives authority over building matters to the town administrator. The deal would have to be approved by the select board, but ultimately the town administrator has a charter-defined role in the reuse of town buildings.
I don't know what that
Does
means.
that include the sale?
It doesn't include the financial terms of the sale. I mean, the town administrator will be the one who negotiates that and would bring something to the select board. The select board doesn't get involved in the day-to-day nuance of negotiations. That would be done, the town administrator with town council would deal with the financial negotiations. The select board would be involved in, big picture aspects to that and final approval.
So the select board couldn't enter into a contract, say, with
To sell a
buyer
town, to sell a town building without the town administrator's involvement? I mean, ultimately, that's a question for town council, but I don't think so.
But the town administrator is not an independent body. That's not part of the legislative process.
I mean, as I said, there is charter,
She works-
language.
You
that
guys
we-
review her. She's going to do what you guys say. Come
Yes.
on.
I mean, we could probably direct her to do something that is opposing her recommendation. I see that as a real edge case, unlikely situation. I will.
See, this is why I'm not sure this is not a financial decision. I don't believe that the Appropriations Committee should necessarily weigh in on this, because there's no financial question before us. Look, White Cliffs was a disaster from the get-go. Why we approved it, I have no idea. I was at one of those 1% at the town meeting, and I go most of the time too, so, and I voted no for that. And having 4 West Main, that was a smart thing, because it was only $10,000. You just don't turn that away. But to say that we're going to take real property and a 3-2 vote on the Board of Selectmen could get a transaction done of some size, just doesn't, there's a reason we have a House and a Senate in most legislatures, to have just one body for a decision like this, when our legislative body is the town meeting, it doesn't sit well with me. If we are going to have to record a vote, I'll be voting no on all of this, because there's no financial numbers. And that's not to say I don't want to sell White Cliffs. I do. But I don't like the way it's structured.
And I'll just say on that, thank you, Mitch, our mechanism for disposition of town properties is this process. So I'm not as concerned about the process of the select board with town staff and council and all that doing those transactions. I feel a little differently on the TIFs, but in terms of this article, I'm prepared to, have a vote this evening, and then in our narrative, talk about our discussion on this. Unless we want to retract the motion.
I'm not going to retract the motion.
All right,
I think we can vote on it.
let's do our vote on this. Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
No.
Tim?
No.
And I am an aye. I believe that's a 2-4?
Correct.
Thank you. Article 44, tax increment financing for White Cliffs. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee recommend approval of Article 44, tax increment financing for White Cliffs.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, George.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
what is the?
I'd like to hear it too, yeah.
What's the package?
The language.
Okay, so,
Read that language.
again, it's fairly broad, but it says, to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to enter into a tax increment financing TIF agreement pursuant to MGL Chapter 40, Section 59, and the regulations of the Massachusetts Economic Assistance Coordinating Council for the property known as White Cliffs located at 167 Main Street, and to approve the submission of a TIF plan and agreement to the Massachusetts Economic Assistance Coordinating Council for approval, and further, to authorize the select board to negotiate and execute any agreements and documents necessary to implement said TIF agreement or take any other action relative thereto. So, it's a,
Unlike the sale of town properties, we haven't done this before. We don't know what the process is, and we don't have history. So that's where I'd feel a little better if there was a mechanism for our committee to participate in the formulation of a tax incentive.
If I understood, I forget her name from Marlboro,
Meredith.
Meredith. If I understood her
apologize for not remembering
correctly,
her last name.
the amount of additional tax that's deferred is on the additional value that they add when they build whatever it is they're going to build on the property they're buying. They're still paying whatever the nominal tax rate is for the property they bought, like anyone would, but we're giving them essentially really more of an assessment break for a number of years on the value that they add, and then that gets phased out over
Correct.
time. Is that correct?
correct, yeah.
Because when she was presenting it, I was struggling to see a downside, the way the state has it regulated. So I don't have a distrust of that process naturally, because it looked like I didn't really see much of a downside. But welcome discussion.
Go ahead, Terry.
So, number of questions come up as to the length of the tax deferral, how much of a tax deferral, what is the actual use of the property? There's a whole bunch of questions that impact us financially once we get rid of the property. What's the tax value of an old building that is not used? I mean, the land's worth something, but we don't know anything about the entire financial picture of it. And we're just going to say, yeah, go ahead, you guys go negotiate something. With no check and balance. I'm not comfortable with it. I mean, I think TIFs are great. I have no problem with a TIF. As I recall, I think we did TIFs on some of the stuff on over by the old Mass Electric building and things like that. We've done them before. It was 25 years ago. I have no problem with doing a TIF. They make great sense.
The process.
The process.
Or the terms.
What are the terms? What's the process to get there? You know, it's just, while town meeting might have all sorts of pluses and minuses to it, it's our legislative body. And that's why there's a House and a Senate, and there's discussion, and, well, I don't know, I can't give carte blanche, I just can't.
And I would compare this to one we'll talk about for 9 Goddard, where at least we have some additional information and there's, some idea of
But even in
the
that,
value.
we know the sort of the value, but
But still,
You still-
don't know the terms. Yeah.
And then even, I mean, they haven't asked for a specific number yet. We don't even know. Are we willing to enter into good faith discussions? Absolutely. But that's about it.
Any other discussion?
No, I worry about the other side of that coin, which is just that if we're not in a position where we're able to offer it, then we could be turning business investors away from our town. Because Marlboro will welcome them. Because they don't have to worry about town meeting, they can just do it.
That's correct. But, for example, the White Cliffs is such a unique piece of property that the reason for that, for any interest would be because it is a unique piece of
Sure,
property,
sure.
right? And who's ever buying it understands that they're buying it from a government entity. And it's not like they don't expect there to be some sort of process.
Sure. No, that's fair. That's a fair statement for for this article, yeah.
For White Cliffs,
Yeah,
and even
White
for
Cliffs,
4 West,
Yeah.
right?
That's a good point.
Any,
Yeah, relative to the discussion about that we saw the presentation at the library from the Marlboro Economic Development, the one thing that makes it easier for Marlboro to enter into these TIFs is obviously the form of government, where they have a city form of government, where their legislative body meets every other week or
Right.
twice a month or something with that regularity, whereas our legislative body meets once annually. So
Right.
that's one thing that they have at their advantage. One thing that we have in our advantage is that we don't always need to offer TIFs because of the single tax rate in town, compared to our tax rate is significantly lower than the business tax rate in Marlboro. So I think that's one thing where by design, they as a city entity with a split tax rate, they probably are needing to offer the TIFs more frequently.
So then, are you suggesting then we should have a special town meeting? When there's a TIF proposal, a property sale with a TIF, then we're saying that that's a town meeting?
That's typically what's happened in the past.
Okay.
And and that's why you have the ability to call a special town meeting. Or, yeah, I know there's even been discussions about whether or not we should have them, every 6 months or anyways for certain things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great way. And I think it also helps a lot with the communication around town residents. I was talking to somebody the other day, and just as an aside, there's no newspapers today, right? So people don't get the full story. You got to work hard to find out what's going on from a political and economic perspective within the town of Northborough. And more often so I wouldn't be opposed to spending the extra 10 grand, even though we need an override, to have a town meeting every 6 months. It's worth it. It's worth it. We always talk about it, in this day and age, there's communication everywhere. Well, there might be stuff out there, but how much content has been absorbed, we don't know. So, not like the old days when you had the telegram delivered to your door.
makes sense. All right. Let's take it to a vote then. On Article 44, the TIF for White Cliffs. Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No?
Tim?
Aye.
And Scott is a no. Article 45, sale or lease of 4 West Main. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, move that the committee make a recommendation on whether to approve Article 45, lease or sale of town-owned building for West Main Street.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion?
I can't wait to sell it, but Terry's convinced me that special town meeting makes sense. So.
Excellent.
I think the discussion we had
Yeah,
for,
see above.
yes, 44, 43 and 44 carry for 45 and 46, so.
Agree.
Excellent. All right. Go for a vote on that. This will be by roll call for 45 on 4 West Main. Lease or sale. Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No?
Tim?
No.
And Scott is a yes. Article 46, TIF for 4 West Main. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee make a recommendation on whether to approve Article 46, tax increment financing for West Main Street.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Bob. Any further discussion? Anything that makes 4 West Main different? All right, we'll take our vote. Bob?
No.
George?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Terry?
No.
Tim?
No.
And Scott is a no. And finally, 47, TIF for 9 Goddard Road.
Is it now not confidential?
Mitch, do you have more information on Project Evolve and 9 Goddard?
Gee whiz, it's a coincidence that there happens to be an address on there when we talked about a Project Evolve project conceptually a couple of weeks ago.
Is it a typo?
Maybe. It's not, we have to put the address on a TIF item, so you can't.
They're aware of this?
Yeah. I would ask that confidentiality and even if you have a good sense in your head as to what this firm might be, don't say it out loud because they've asked us not to at this point. I would ask that you think about this TIF item a little bit differently than the prior two. This is a known project. It's a known business in town. At town meeting, we will be able to share exactly who it is and some additional details about the project. And I'm hoping that they will be there to answer questions about the project as well.
But discussions wouldn't have progressed to be talking actual terms because they're still looking to get their corporate.
Correct. This is
funding.
important because this is a tool for them to use to go up the ladder to their corporate overlords and say, please give us the many millions of dollars that we want to spend in Northborough on building out this facility.
Have they requested a specific amount?
They have not. No. No, they at this point want to say, yes, the town is willing to talk. That's all they need at this point.
That's what, and we've said that in our.
But I think it will be helpful if town meeting says yes on this one. I think it will be harmful if town meeting says no.
And I think that's why it should not be on the warrant. Because I think you're getting ahead of yourself. You have a letter from the Appropriations Committee saying that we're fully supportive of it. We're happy to enter into good faith negotiations regarding any incentives that you're looking for. If you go to town meeting and you have nothing to say in terms of how much it's going to cost, you can't go into a lot of details because it's still somewhat confidential or whatever, people are going to say no, and then you've just shot yourself in the foot.
We already have some information on the cost of this project and what the long-term tax benefit will be to the town. We have not negotiated the TIF yet. You're absolutely correct. And we will not be able to negotiate the TIF prior to town meeting. I would, again, I have no objection to your decisions on the prior TIF agreements. I've never brought a TIF agreement forward without it.
Until now.
Being so open-ended. That's just, where it is. This one, I think, is important for the town's economic development future to get this done.
Yeah, this is another one where I feel, I was saying on the previous ones, I don't know. This one, I know enough about the firm and the benefit to the town that my reservations of not having gone through the process before and turning, I still want to look for Appropriations Committee to have a part to play in the
But it doesn't
discussions.
based on the warrant article.
And so,
So there's no point in us even signing off on that letter.
I think it is important to show our support,
Well, we did.
and I think it will be important to further show our support through the town meeting vote so that the firm can get their funding for their project.
Can the warrant article simply say that we'll be open to good faith discussions to grant a TIF to be approved at a special town meeting, the terms to be approved at a future town meeting? Because that way it still shows that we're willing to do it. It shows that the town meeting body's willing to do it, but it doesn't actually give anyone the authority to enter into it by on any specific terms. It just says like, we're committed to negotiating a TIF with you and the final terms to be approved at a special town meeting. Is there anything wrong with doing that? It's still, because right now, all we're trying to do is
I
show
almost
like,
have
hey,
to
we're
let
on
you
board.
Answer that again, Mitch. Yeah, thanks.
So the select board is the negotiating body for TIFs. Town meeting has to grant authority to the select board to enter into a TIF agreement. The details of that TIF are not approved by town meeting. Usually, the most common situation that I've been in, not in Northborough but elsewhere, is that a TIF is 90% negotiated by the time it gets to town meeting, and you can say, this is what we're on track for. Obviously, we're not there with this one. We're too early, but this is, I think, appropriate for this particular project, for it to be open-ended. Obviously, I don't know whether I'll be on the select board when this gets a little bit further, but if I am, yeah, I mean, and I think the select board would need to have your involvement, and just as you have. I mean, we didn't do that economic development meeting on our own. We said, this is really important, and appropriations and financial planning had to be there. So I hope you recognize that sets the precedent for your involvement in the process.
Thank you.
Susan Keys.
Susan, you have a comment?
See, I think it's all going to be an executive session of the select board and no one's going to know what's happening. No disrespect, Mitch, but that's what's going to happen. I think that when it comes to.
That is the process, right, for negotiations. The select board
Right,
negotiates,
but then
and it's not in
it'll be a
an
done deal. After this warrant article, there will be no involvement by anyone else, is what I'm saying. So that we won't be involved.
You could be invited in to an executive session. You could post and go in with the Board of Selectmen if they chose to do so. I'm standing up to say that I believe when that gentleman spoke the other night, didn't he have a date of about the 15th that he was supposed to get back to his people, that he has to get approval to be able to move forward on this, to go into negotiations? And didn't they say they'd be happy with letters of recommendation and in support of it? They said nothing about the need for a TIF to be able to make this happen. They didn't ask for a TIF, and they didn't say they needed one, but maybe I heard them incorrectly.
I think she's correct.
No, I mean, there wasn't explicitly asked for at the time. Yeah, so that's totally correct.
I
Go ahead.
will anyway. I've been at meetings solely as the chair of the select board that involved the town administrator and planning director and some other folks, and the folks that you met from Marlboro. There is an expectation that a TIF would be needed for them to sell this higher up in their process. It's not something that we came up with out of thin air.
They are the reason we've started talking about TIFs again, if I kind of think of it that way.
I think you could take you could take a real educated guess that meeting was scheduled as a result of a meeting that took place at a particular location involving some of the people that were in that room that we brought over to the library.
So it's important to the company.
Thank you.
Other discussion? We'll take our vote. This is for 47 on TIF for 9 Goddard Road. Bob?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Terry. Go ahead.
You had an idea before of like we didn't have enough information to vote on something. Maybe this is one where we don't have enough information to vote on something, and that waiting until town meeting might be more appropriate.
We haven't moved this one yet.
No, there's no motion yet.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to doing a TIF. I want that perfectly clear. I am not opposed to doing a TIF. I just don't like the process.
This is an item where we would be receiving additional information, maybe, before town meeting.
Not about the TIF, it didn't sound like.
But in terms of feedback from the parent corporation perhaps?
I mean, we could I certainly expect that at town meeting, we will disclose who the company is. I hope to have representatives at the meeting.
At the meeting, yeah. So in their preparation for town meeting, they will have, if nothing else, we would have the early look at their presentation.
Correct.
And so whatever is going to be said at town meeting, we would preview that, even if it was as late as minutes before town meeting started.
Because I
Yeah.
don't, I mean, what we wrote in that letter is absolutely the gospel truth of what I think the committee adopted. So to ask us to go further without, I mean, all we said was we would enter into good faith negotiations, right? Okay, I'm happy to do that. I
Yeah.
just want to know what those, what the dollar amount is.
Okay, let's go one more.
Yeah, no, I apologize, this is sounding like a back and forth. What we wouldn't have from that letter is a commitment from town meeting that the town was comfortable doing a TIF. And that's what the town meeting vote would get us.
And what happens if, because you don't have enough information, that people say no?
Then I think there's a risk of us losing the project. I really do.
And I understand that, that's why I don't want to put it on the town meeting.
That's the point.
Yeah, but they have said that this is something that they need to sell it up the food chain and get the funding within their large multinational corporation for this project. And I'm just relaying what I've been told by.
They said they needed it this town meeting?
They were very happy that the town meeting was when it was.
I think this is what I heard Susan say, would there be a way to say that the way we could do this is include both the appropriations and the financial planning groups in the approval of the TIF? So it's not opening it up to the town. So in other words, it would be expanding the warrant article, not just to say to the Board of Selectmen, but would say to the Board of Selectmen plus the town financial committees.
So I don't think we can do that with a town meeting article, but what we can do is, I would ask you to maybe, if this was consensus of your board, maybe send a request and a suggestion for a motion from the select board that when we make our recommendations for town meeting, when we get to this item, we could feasibly say, make an actual commitment that the Appropriations Committee and Financial Planning would be involved in the negotiations of the TIF.
Okay, yeah, I get where you're going on that. I will talk more on that.
Can I ask that potentially you consider having an executive session for any of the boards you want involved in this, so you could call an executive session before town meeting? And if there are some answers to questions that people have that they can tell in an executive session, it might make it a lot easier for all of you.
I have no objection to that. I don't think there's anything that
We
even
might
in
not
executive
get-
session, because we haven't discussed terms of a TIF. We have discussed that they need an incentive to sell this to their higher-ups. They need to know that there's an incentive on the table.
So we wouldn't even pursue the terms of any sort of TIF until they came back and said, we have a commitment to spend this much money in Northborough. Now let's.
Yeah, it would probably be a little bit of a back and forth. They may get a generic appropriation within the company and say, yes, we're committed to doing that. Then we have the negotiation, then they send that back up, and then they get final sign-off, something like that. I'm guessing there's going to be some back and forth steps involved in this one.
Just post an executive session, it will always come in handy.
I said, I have no objection. I can't even think of anything that I could share within that executive session that you don't know or can very reasonably guess at this point.
Well, let's make sure it's not guessing, that's the point.
I doubt it. I don't think we'll have any financial information that wasn't presented at the last select board meeting.
I guess I kind of like the idea of deferring a vote on this, because there will be some additional information. It might still not be enough, but it's an opportunity. Just wait just a little bit more. This is the type of thing that, it's going to be a black and white presentation, whatever they plan to show at town meeting, we can get an early review of that, and then walk into town meeting with our recommendation.
Agree.
Does that
That's fine.
that sound good? So we'll.
I'm much more comfortable with that.
So let's pass over 47. We'll defer our vote on that. We'll write it up in the report, right?
Okay.
Additional, if we
And
know
it follows
there's additional
I mean,
information.
the letter that we drafted is public.
Yep.
So
We're not disagreeing anything we put in the letter at all. It's just,
we're just waiting for more information, because it says in the letter, we know we're going to learn more information in the months to come.
Right.
So,
That's a way to just kind of,
and,
Let's
yeah,
keep-
So I
keep
don't
it
want to
rolling
scuttle the
forward.
deal, I worry about putting it on town. I wouldn't have put it on town meeting warrant, but that's too late.
all right. So to wrap up the report, I do need a motion that allows Jason and I to incorporate the comments, provide some additional narrative, and work on an updated, I'm going to call it an updated draft. Because what I do want to, I want to send it out again. I want to be careful that we aren't circulating a document and taking stuff and not having an open meeting around it. So if it looks like that we need to have a discussion about the narrative. I think with, like, if I look at the changes that Terry provided earlier, those incorporate easily and don't need a lot, but then
But all the commentary that you're going to put in is.
the way I want to incorporate some of our earlier feelings on the town budget, I think that'll need seeing.
But if we don't deliberate, and we're just simply saying, yes, that's what we said.
Yeah,
No,
it's
we
whether,
didn't say it that way.
yeah, it's whether it's like, oh, no, I want to incorporate this sentence, and then, it all goes out to
Got
everyone.
it,
So
okay,
then we're
okay, yeah.
asynchronously deliberating
Got it.
through email, right? That's what we want to
Avoid,
avoid.
yeah.
Yeah, when it's compiling it all together, and then we issue the update, and then that's.
So you
that's-
will review it for, no, that's not what was said, essentially.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just gonna look for typos
so-
and say.
Let me see how well we can do this. And then we'll see how that goes. So there might be a need. Well, actually, let's take this bit then. May I have a motion that authorizes myself to finalize the report if it turns out that there's not significant changes that we need to get together again and work through that in open meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Terry. I'll do a quick vote on that. Bob?
Aye.
George?
aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Scott's and I. Thank you very much on that. Okay. So if we do nothing else, we would have our next meeting just before town meeting on the 28th. What I will do is look at what times might be available prior to that and I'll send out some tentative dates or a tentative date and just ask whether you can, it's open or not. Let's tentatively put another meeting on the calendar. And then if it turns out that I did the best writing of my life and we don't need it, then we don't need it.
Well, the
Yeah, so
printer,
the-
it's the 8th is the drop dead, right?
Yeah, so we're kind of backed into, if we're going to include this in the
I'm
town meeting
sorry,
book,
yeah.
it'll be
No,
next
so-
week, yeah.
No, you're right.
But that's
We're
okay,
looking
so
at
that's,
it this
that's
weekend.
Tuesday, so
We
it's
don't have
pretty
time.
much gotta be
We don't have
Monday. or-
time. Okay, no, I gotta wrap it.
Right, so-
Sorry about that. Yeah,
So tomorrow's Friday, so you pretty much got the weekend.
yeah,
and-
that's it.
and- Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jason.
Just do a great job, Scott.
Yeah.
We'll go on that.
It's as easy as that.
I think to the point was that we came up with a draft to encapsulate the comments that had been discussed through the committee. I know there's some suggested edits to it and strengthening language and adding more language around certain things. I don't think those comments are going to be any different from what's been discussed as a whole. And unless anybody's uncomfortable with any of those opinions or commentary being put into writing and included in the report, I think we can come up with a draft that is compliant with what everybody's understanding of what the report is going to say. And we can send it around, and I guess we can look for individual objections to it becoming the final report.
Yeah, as long as we don't send it around to everybody, if we just send comments back to you, is that acceptable?
We want to do it through Jason.
Yeah, if you do it through me, then we're individually, and we're not deliberating back and forth with other members. It'll be
Okay,
fine.
that works. I'm good. Yep.
Okay, good stuff. Then we'll proceed in that bit. Any other business?
I said, I hope not.
No, adjourning.
I move to adjourn. Second.
So Terry with the motion, is there a second?
Well, Jeff, no.
I moved, he seconded, we're good.
Oh, I missed it. I missed the voices, I was looking the other way. Jeff with the motion, Terry with the second. Let's take our roll call vote.
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Jeff? Terry? Tim?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you very much, all, appreciate it, at 9:34.
Thanks again, Jason. Good job.
And I do want to say, I really appreciate the fact that you did deliberate discussion